The chandeliers at the Schomburg Center poured warm gold over glass and velvet, and the city's gatekeepers wore their confidence like expensive perfume. Conversations floated in polished fragments, alumni endowments, gala tables, legacy seats, while a young woman at the wing of the stage pressed a dog-eared note card to her palm and breathed in through her nose, out through parted lips the way Nana Ruth had taught her when a room felt too big. Imani Carter, 20 and unflinchingly present, rolled her shoulders back and counted the reasons she was here. The kids waiting in Mott Haven for buses that didn't come on time. The binder of Saturday lesson plans that smelled faintly of dry erase and hope. The way Granddad Earl said a name ought to be a beginning and not a boundary. She could feel the weight of important eyes, old money, new money, and the kind that pretended not to remember where it came from, measuring her before she even spoke. A stagehand lifted 2 fingers. "You're up." Imani stepped into the light. "Good evening," she said, and the room tilted toward her. "I'm Imani Carter, founder of Roots and Rise. We mentor students the map forgets until those students do something the map can't ignore. If you're wondering what that looks like, it looks like Nyla mailing college brochures to herself because she liked the way her name looked next to admitted. It looks like Tariq recording vocabulary on a flip phone and playing it under his pillow. It looks like a door that opens at the same time every day and a person who knows your name when you walk through." Polite curiosity softened into quiet. Imani let the silence breathe. "I come from receipts tucked in prayer books, bus schedules folded into coat pockets, the kind of kitchen where love tastes like cornbread and counsel. I'm 20 because time doesn't ask permission before it throws you into the deep end. My parents passed when I was a teenager, and the choice was drown or learn your own lungs. I chose lungs. Roots and Rise is that choice scaled. Mentorship, tutoring, rides home, a table where you're expected and not just tolerated. We are not here to impress you. We are here to invite you into work that outlives your nameplates." A few heads lifted. A few pens scratched notes they would later call insights. She spoke of outcomes, hours logged, graduation rates nudged upward, the price of a monthly bus pass compared to a week of lattes, and of the ordinary kindness that changes trajectories. Like a volunteer who learned the exact way Nyla counted on her fingers, or the custodian who left the lights on late because Tariq liked the quiet at 7 p.m. When she reached the last card, she didn't need it. A zip code should not decide the size of your future. A last name should not be the only hand on a lever. If you want to know who I am, start with the keys on my ring. They open rooms where kids walk in and start to believe their voice belongs on the record. Applause broke with a clean edge. Not thunderous, but sincere. And for a breath she let it wash over her. Then the adrenaline that had kept her steady a moment before sluiced away too fast. The lights brightened to needles. The stage shifted half an inch. She put her palm on the podium. Her knee wobbled. It was not drama, just the soft collapse of a body that had slept 4 hours a night for a week and remembered too late that it had forgotten lunch. The applause blurred. The note card slid. And then a hand caught her elbow, warm, steady, unshowy, guiding her out of the cone of light and onto a chair behind the velvet curtain. "Water's coming," a voice said low enough to be private. Shaped like a promise instead of a command, a moment later a cool bottle pressed into her palm and the voice added, "Breathe with me, 4 in, 6 out." She did. The room settled by degrees. Chandeliers, velvet, murmurs, the hum of professional quiet. When her vision stopped glittering at the corners, she lifted her chin to see the man crouched at eye level so she didn't have to look up while she steadied herself. A tailored tux that looked bought, not borrowed. Shoulders that could have chosen arrogance and didn't. A face people probably tried to befriend for the wrong reasons. Eyes that seemed, inexplicably, to be interested in hers without trying to own them. "I'm Malik Sinclair," he said, voice still at that private volume, as if names were things to be exchanged with care. "You just gave that room something real." "I gave them a scare." Imani's laugh had edges but no apology. "I forgot to eat." "Even real things wobble," he said, and the way he said it made wobbling feel like a physics fact and not a failure. "Do you need air? Another chair?" "A granola bar." "I have an embarrassing number of pockets." "Water is good." She took another sip, let it sit on her tongue, swallowed slow. The world stopped feeling like a hallway with too many doors. She could hear the gala resuming. the MC gliding into the next segment with the practiced grace of someone who could tap dance through a fire alarm. "Thank you," she said, "for catching me before I made Gravity's night." "My pleasure," he said, barely smiling, because he seemed to know better than to make a joke of a moment that wasn't one. "I didn't want your message to be reduced to a clip of you falling." She watched him watch her, not with clinical scrutiny, not with the smirk of someone who knows the price of things, but like a person cataloging the facts he needed to be useful, a pulse returning to pace, a hand loosening its grip on plastic, a woman calculating whether she had to stand up yet. "Do you always hang out in stage wings rescuing strangers? Only the ones telling the truth in rooms that confuse truth with volume?" He stood, offered a hand, didn't insist when she didn't take it. "No rush, stay seated as long as you want." "I will." She inhaled once more, deeper now. "How did you know the breathing count?" "Track coach," he said with a motion toward his chest that could have meant the past lived there. "And nerves are universal. I've just learned to spend mine where no one can see them." "And now you see mine," she said, not embarrassed. "Too late to pretend I float." "I saw you stand," he said, the first real smile, small and steady. "That's the part I'll remember." Backstage etiquette reasserted itself around them, stage managers in black whispering cues, a florist adjusting a wayward stem, a server lifting a silver tray like a ceremony. Malik shifted half a step so he blocked her from casual sightlines without turning his body into a wall. Imani noted it. Though she wouldn't admit it yet, he had the kind of awareness people mistake for charm when it's actually care. "Is this the part where you hand me a card and tell me what I should be doing differently?" she asked, teasing to test. "I don't have cards," he said. "Just questions. Where is your wait list longest? Which nights do you lose mentors to second shifts? What would one new van do versus 5 more laptops? If someone writes a check, will it buy more breath for the work or just noise around it?" She blinked, surprised, then let her mouth answer because it wanted to. "Mott Haven is packed. Wednesday nights dip because folks pick up overtime. A van means kids don't have to choose between safety and staying late. Laptops help. But what helps more is the adult who remembers a kid's sister's name, and checks only matter if they come with patience and without a leash." "Understood," he said, and somehow she believed that he did. "Would you ever let someone sit in the back and listen before pretending to help?" "If they know how to keep their mouth shut," she said, mouth curving. "I'm wildly overqualified in that skill at certain events," he said, and she laughed, a clean sound that loosened the last knot between her shoulder blades. On stage, applause rose again. The segment was ending. A runner leaned in to ask if she needed anything else. Imani shook her head. She had her feet under her now. "Thank you, Mr. Sinclair," she said, standing carefully, her hand sliding along the velvet curtain to prove to her knees that it was possible. "I'm going to find my coat before I'm trapped in an hour of polite congratulations." "Malik," he corrected gently. "And if you don't mind simple coffee. No photographers, no promises. I'd like to hear more. Not pitch you, hear you. I know a place by Columbia that serves something that tastes like coffee and honesty." Imani studied him for the length of a heartbeat. He wasn't selling a future or himself. He wasn't asking for the right to her time. He wasn't assuming proximity. He was offering to be quiet enough to listen. She nodded once. "Tomorrow afternoon. Text me a time. I'll send you a corner where the chairs don't wobble." She took his phone when he offered it, not possessive, just practical, and typed her number with the kind of calm that made its own weather. "If a camera shows up, I walk. I'll choose the door without cameras," he said. "Those exist if you've learned the maps." "Good," she said, and meant it. "I prefer maps that were made by people who actually walked the streets." He stepped back so she could pass and didn't follow, didn't force an escort, didn't make a gesture larger than the moment could hold. Imani threaded through a corridor of framed photographs. Lecterns and luminaries passed, then into the lobby where the chandeliers felt less accusatory. People tried to stop her with the light touch of congratulations, the heavy hand of opportunity. She smiled with polite economy and kept moving. Outside, Harlem breathed a colder air that tasted like relief. Her phone buzzed as she zipped her coat. "An unknown number. This is Malik. Thank you for trusting me with 5 minutes. Coffee tomorrow, 2:30? I'll keep the world small." She read the words twice, liking the humility of trusting me with 5 minutes. She didn't owe him anything beyond that, and he seemed to know it. 2:30 works. I prefer seats by windows and exits." He sent a pin and a simple thumbs up. No flourish. On the sidewalk, an SUV idled, a driver peering out to see if she needed a ride. Imani shook her head and cut left into the night, boots steady. The city folding around her in familiar blocks of bodegas and brownstones, and the sound of someone laughing 2 floors up. She bought a bottled smoothie from a corner store where the owner called her Professor because he liked how she spoke to his little cousins. She texted Keisha a quick "I didn't pass out." "I almost did. Long story. Tell you everything in the morning." Then a separate message to Nana Ruth made it through. "Addie late, don't fuss." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Then Nana's response arrived like a hug. "Proud, eat earlier, sleep. The Lord loves common sense." Back in her apartment, she kicked her shoes by the door and leaned her forehead against cool plaster. The day poured off her in slow measures. The stage, the lights, the moment the world tilted. The way a stranger's hand had steadied her without turning the moment into a rescue she had to repay. She did not want a savior. She wanted a partner for the work, someone who could look at the ledger of hours and understand that love, to be useful, must be scheduled. She brushed her teeth, set her alarm, and slid into a sleep that felt like a clean page. Somewhere across the city, a man looked at a calendar and blocked an hour with a name he refused to turn into a project. He closed his laptop, stood at a window that made the skyline look like a museum piece, and tried to remember the last time he'd felt nervous in a way that meant he still had skin in the game. His chest answered for him. Tomorrow then, coffee and honesty. No spotlights, no stage. Just 2 chairs by a window and the quiet, deliberate work of deciding whether 2 people could make room enough for a mission and a life at the same table. The coffee place. Malik Pin turned out to be a narrow room with fogged windows and mismatched chairs that somehow made the whole thing feel intentional. A barista pulled shots like a drummer keeping perfect time, and the bell above the door rang with the memory of 100 rushed mornings. Imani arrived 2 minutes early, because being early had taught her more than being brilliant ever did. She chose a table by the window with a clean sightline to the door, and the exit and the mirror behind the counter that let her catch what the window missed. She texted back corner by the plant and set her phone face down. When Malik stepped in, cap pulled low, scarf tucked, not trying to be invisible so much as not demanding to be seen, the bell made a small sound that felt like restraint instead of interruption. "Hi," he said, stopping a step short of her space so she could decide how close this would be. "You look more rested." "Hi," she returned. And because she refused to make a performance out of small mercies, she added, "I ate breakfast." His smile said he was relieved she had taken care of herself without turning it into a favor he could claim. They ordered. She took something dark and unsweetened. He added a slice of banana bread to the tray like he'd meant to feed the day, too, and then the conversation slid into place without scraping its knees. He didn't open with his last name, didn't offer a resume disguised as humility. He asked how Roots and Rise triaged the wait list, whether she was tracking outcomes by cohort or by kid, what she'd learned about who stayed and who drifted. She told him the truth. The kids who stayed were the ones who felt essential to something, not just recipients of help. The ones who drifted were often the ones who couldn't find a reason to show up for themselves that didn't sound like someone else's dream. He asked what she'd do with one unrestricted gift and what she'd refuse even if it came wrapped in more zeros than mercy. She said, "We'd hire a volunteer coordinator who grew up in a zip code like ours, and we'd add a van for late rides, and I would refuse any check that asked me to change the kids to suit a donor's mirror." He nodded like she'd just put a map on the table with the roads already traced. When she asked what he did at his father's company and what he actually wanted to do, Malik took a breath long enough to count as an answer. "I do what I'm good at. Read the room, find the seam, close the deal. I've spent years being fluent in a language written by people who never raise their voices. What I want is to ask what any of that is for." He tore the banana bread in half and set her share on a napkin without asking if she wanted it, as if sharing what you brought was part of speaking plainly. There were moments when it felt clear. Sports once. I ran the 400 in high school. There's this point where your legs tell you the truth about whether you trained enough. I like that honesty. I haven't felt that kind of simple in a while. "Honesty isn't simple," she said, but her mouth softened at the memory of bus stop winters and flashcards under streetlights. "It's just rare in rooms that reward performance." "That's why your speech landed," he said. "You didn't play them. You invited them. You told a room full of lever pullers that kids are not levers, Some of those lever pullers fund the programs that keep our lights on, she reminded him. Not unkind. I'm not allergic to wealth. I'm allergic to wealth that needs to see its reflection in every window. Agreed. He leaned back, not retreating, just giving the words time to stand. I'm trying to be the kind of person who doesn't need the mirror. She studied him for a breath she didn't fill with apology or suspicion. Trying is a verb I respect. They compared notes on their grandmothers. His Nana Lorraine, who refused to let anyone call her anything but Nana because titles made her laugh. Her Nana Ruth, who could stretch $1 and a story the exact same length and never break either. He confessed he still measured time by track meets and quarterly earnings even when neither applied. She admitted she could run a budget in her sleep, but still sometimes forgot to eat on days that asked too much. He didn't jump on the confession with fixes. He wrote nothing down and still remembered every name she said like his attention had a better pen. An hour smoothed itself into an hour and a half. The table next to them turned over twice. A student with a violin case wandered in and played a few notes with fingers blue from the cold. When the bell rang again, Imani lifted her eyes without moving her head. It was old habit, the kind that got you home safe and on time. Outside, a sedan idled with a driver who looked bored but alert. She clocked it and kept talking. Malik noticed, too, the way his mouth tightened barely at the corners, then eased when she didn't tense. Walk with me? He asked when cups were empty, and the room had learned their rhythm. No agenda. Just air. 2 blocks daylight, then I have to get back to campus, she said. There's a volunteer who forgot she promised a ride. I'd rather get mad at her with compassion than over text. They stepped onto the sidewalk and the cold reached up immediately. Malik matched her pace without making it look like protection. New York did that winter thing where every breath felt like clarity and every corner felt like a chance to change your mind. They talked about small things, favorite public bench, which bakery underbaked their cookies in a way that felt like kindness, how different the same block could feel at noon and at 9. Half a block down, Imani saw it. A glint in a parked car, not the color of any January sun. A lens catching light, the stillness of someone practicing patience for a living. She didn't stiffen. She set her coffee cup carefully in a trash can and tightened her scarf. Left at the bookstore, she said. Conversational. Malik didn't ask why. He followed, slipping his phone into his pocket as if he'd just remembered he owned one. Is this your world a lot? She asked, still looking straight ahead. It tries to be, he said. I've learned to be boring when I need to be. Cameras hate boring. They go where the noise is. I can do boring like it's a calling, she said, a small dry smile in her voice. I think you do purpose like it's a calling, he corrected. Different, but it looks similar from far away. They cut left with 3 other pedestrians, folded themselves into the stream of a city that never moved for anyone, and somehow made space for everyone. At the crosswalk, Malik angled his body not quite between the lens and her, more like he'd chosen a spot where his height made interesting pictures harder to take. She noticed and didn't mention it. You didn't compliment people for remembering you were a human being. On the next block, she turned them into a campus alley where deliveries came, and students forgot to pretend they weren't cold. The sedan didn't follow because the angle was wrong for money shots and the driver knew it. Thank you, she said finally, near a wall of flyers that promised bands and housing and salvation. Not for walking, for not making a scene. I don't like scenes, he said. I like exits and windows and rooms where the loudest thing is a plan. I'd like to keep my life in those rooms, she said. So here are my rules. No surprises, no posts, no showing up at the center with gifts and cameras. If we build anything, it's because the work needed scaffolding, not because we wanted headlines. And if my name ends up under yours, it's because I put it there. Agreed, he said immediately, like he'd been waiting for the rules. Like rules were a relief in a city that loved improvisation a little too much. They reached the gate where campus security eyed IDs with the focus of people paid to remember faces. She stopped where the brick made a corner out of the wind. He tucked his hands into his coat pockets and didn't reach for her because some moments stretched wider when you didn't try to hold them. I have a board meeting tomorrow, he said, not as a threat or a boast, just a weather report. I can steer some money and some minds without attaching your name. I'd rather we walk slow and right than fast and loud. Slow and right is the only speed I'm offering, she said. And if anyone asks, we met at a coffee shop and talked about vans and mentors and how to not waste a kid's after-school hour. Which is true. It is. He looked past her at the lamppost with the sticker that said in chipped letters, "You belong here. Can I call you this evening?" No pressure. Just to confirm you made it to your 3 o'clock and to ask what I should be reading about youth employment pipelines. Text first, she said. I'll tell you if it's a good time. And read the city's own reports. They're dry, but they tell on themselves. He laughed, quick and surprised, like someone realizing a joke took the length of a paragraph to land. Text first, he echoed. I'll do my homework. She touched his sleeve. A quick pat like you'd give someone who had remembered to bring water to a long day, then stepped back into campus air. He didn't watch her walk away the way men in movies did. He glanced once to make sure she cleared the gate without hassle, then turned up his collar and headed toward Broadway as if his feet had always known how to move without the world noticing. Imani wasn't 3 steps past security when Keisha's name lit her screen. Well? Her friend had typed, followed by 6 eyeballs and a coffee cup. He listened, Imani replied. He didn't flinch. Might be teachable. Keisha called immediately because punctuation couldn't hold her personality. Teachable is high praise, she said by way of hello. Did he try to fix you? Did he try to fix the city? Did he use the word philanthropy like it was a cologne? He asked good questions, Imani said, keeping her voice low as a group of students passed. And he followed me when I dodged a lens without making me feel like I'd made him leave a party. So he can take direction, Keisha said. Excellent. That's hot. Stop, Imani said and failed not to smile. You're smiling, Keisha crowed. Okay, logistics. The Mott Haven roster is short 2 mentors for Wednesday. And Mr. Henderson called about the van insurance because he heard a rumor we're adding nights. We're not adding anything until we can staff it, Imani said automatically, the muscle memory of leadership tightening her voice. And rumors are not line items. Copy that, Keisha said. Also, Nana Ruth left me a voicemail for you. Tell my girl to take a nap and eat a vegetable. Imani promised to honor at least one of those directives and hung up at the door to her building. The hallway smelled like paint and microwave popcorn. In her room, she dropped her backpack, slid a notebook across the desk and wrote 3 headings. Mentors, transport, outcomes. Under transport, she wrote, van night rides, safe drop-offs. Under outcomes, track cohort by adult relationships, not just homework hours. Under mentors, recruit from churches, barbershops, union halls. She added a line that wasn't a heading at all. Do not let your life become someone else's anecdote. Her phone buzzed once, a number that now had a name, Malik. Texting first as instructed. Did you make it to your 3 o'clock? Also sent myself homework, NYC Youth Employment Reports. If you have a better source, I will not be proud. She let the satisfaction of a boundary respected sit warm for a second. Made it. Read the comptroller's office analysis from last year and the Brennan Center report on after-school funding gaps. And eat something that isn't a meeting, she typed. A minute later, a photo appeared. A takeout container with greens and salmon and something that looked suspiciously like discipline. Compliance, he wrote. Coach would be proud. She didn't send a heart. She sent a thumbs up, which in her language meant good. Keep it up. Don't get ahead of yourself. Late afternoon slid toward evening and the city changed masks. In a car 2 blocks from the coffee shop, a photographer reviewed his shots. 2 figures framed by glass and winter, leaning toward each other in a way that suggested gravity, not performance. He tagged the files and wrote a caption that pretended not to know he was naming a storm. He would not be the first to push publish, but he would not be the last. A story to some people was only real when it hurt. Imani didn't know the exact moment the first image moved across a screen she didn't control. She only felt the old, bone-deep alertness that came when your life brushed past someone else's appetite. She stacked her notes, answered 2 emails from volunteers who had family emergencies and one from a kid who just wanted to tell her he aced a quiz, then packed up for the walk to the center. At the door she paused, hand on the knob, and told the room softly, as if the walls could sign a pact. Mission first. The walls, being old and patient, said nothing, which is sometimes the best kind of agreement. Outside, the light thinned. Breath pooled white. She tightened her scarf and chose the route that kept her moving and visible. Halfway down the block, her phone lit again. Driving past Mott Haven later, Malik wrote, Do you need a lift or would that be an intrusion? I can also not text you for the rest of the day if that is the correct answer. Correct answer is not tonight, she replied, adding before he could mistake the word for a door closing, "I walk this route because it's mine. But thank you for asking instead of assuming." 3 dots blinked, copy, asking, assuming he sent. "I'll see you when the work says I should." She slid the phone into her pocket and let the city collect around her. Sirens in the distance. A bus sighing at a curb. Someone shouting a greeting across a street. A rhythm you could live a life by if you remembered what you were building. At the corner, a newspaper box held yesterday's headlines like a dare. Tomorrow's would try to write her in the tents that made men money. Tonight she would unlock a door. Call roll. Hand out pencils. Tell Nyla that admitted looks good on a page but better on a life. Ask Tariq what word he'd fallen in love with this week. And teach the quiet boys how to turn a breath into a backbone. Somewhere uptown, a man who had learned to be fluent in silence would open a report that miscounted 100 kids and decide that his job, at least for tonight, was to count them right. And somewhere in between, a lens would blink, certain it had captured the beginning of something worth selling, not knowing that beginnings are quieter than flashes and that the work, if it is to last, always happens in rooms too small to be interesting until they're full of names. By morning, the city had already decided what her coffee meant. Notifications stacked on Imani's lock screen like unpaid bills. Unknown numbers, half-familiar outlets, a podcast she'd never heard of tagging her like a prize. A gossip site led with the photo, 2 figures behind fogged glass, a window framing winter, and a caption that dressed suspicion as wit. Comments did their old, exhausted dance about age and ambition in neighborhoods that people only visited when a headline told them to. Keisha knocked once and let herself in with a paper bag of bagels in the face she wore for fires. "Eat," she said, shoving a sesame into Imani's hand and opening her laptop. "We triage." Imani chewed because refusing would make a point she didn't need. She read the first article without blinking. It was neat in the way only paid cruelty can be. Her parents' deaths rendered into a convenient origin story. Nana Ruth's mortgage called colorful backstory. Roots and Rise described as a makeshift tutoring club run by a plucky undergrad. They quoted a dean she'd never met saying nothing specific in a way that sounded like permission to doubt. They spelled her name right. They spelled everything else like a warning. "We could ignore it," Keisha said, scrolling. "Sometimes the second-day story dies if you don't feed it." "The second-day story is already written," Imani said quietly, watching another outlet lift the same photo and add more opinion. "It's waiting to hit publish on whether I'm a distraction or a strategy. Neither is true. I won't let them choose my genre." Her phone buzzed in her palm. "Malik, I'm outside your building. I won't come up unless you ask. I saw it. I'm angry. Tell me what you need that isn't me storming a newsroom." Imani exhaled once through her nose, a sound like choosing. "Don't come up. Not because you're not welcome. Because I need to hear myself think before I hear you. I'll be at the center in an hour." "Copy," he replied. "No cavalry, just a car and a thermos. Text if the ground shifts." "Good," Keisha said, reading Imani's face like a paragraph. "He can be mad on mute." They split the headlines like chores. Keisha flagged the worst inaccuracies and a handful of journalists who still remembered how to verify. Imani wrote names in a margin. Nyla, Tariq, Mrs. Ramirez, who stayed late to mop, Mr. Henderson, who drove kids home without asking for gas money, until the noise shrank to the size of her pen. A sponsor emailed seeking clarity on optics. Another gentler one sent a text that simply read, "Here if you need cover." The landlord who'd promised them a lease extension last month forwarded a note from his insurer with lots of words and the shape of a no in Nana Ruth's kitchen, the radio murmured Sunday, choir on a weekday, and steam fogged the window. Imani held the phone between ear and shoulder while she packed a stack of file folders into her tote. "They pulled pictures from the funeral," she said. "They called it character. They call anything they don't have to live through character," Nana said, voice steady as a metronome. "Child, you can hand them your truth on good dishes and they'll still eat with their fingers. The work is the work. Don't let them track mud on your floors. Also, eat a vegetable." "I had a bagel." "A bagel is a circle with opinions," Nana sniffed. "Put greens in your mouth. And don't let that boy try to fix you. If he's worth his last name, he'll stand still when you tell your story and he'll clap when you're done." At Mott Haven, Imani unlocked the door and breathed the smell of dry erase and old wood. A kid already waited on the stoop, hood up, math binder under his arm. "Miss Carter," he said, voice cracking like a bridge in winter. "Is it true you're famous?" "It's true today is Tuesday and we're doing fractions," she said, holding the door wider. "Fame isn't a snack. Come inside." The afternoon moved like a train on schedule because she made it one. She took attendance, parceled snacks, shifted 2 mentors to cover a late bus, and looked directly at every kid who hovered at the edges like they might slip. Nyla waved her college mailer with shy pride. Tariq whispered that the word of the week was resilient and that he'd said it 3 times in his head before breakfast. When 2 older girls sidled over, thumbs flying across screens, Imani didn't take their phones. She took their attention. "If you see me on the internet," she said, calm and clear, "remember, we don't eat from anybody's comment section. You want to know who I am? Ask me. You want to know what we are? Look around." In the office with the door propped open, she let herself feel it for the first time. Not the embarrassment, she owed nobody that, but the violation of being turned into content. Then she pulled a legal pad close and started a list whose first line read, "Tell it before they sell it." Keisha leaned in. "Press release?" "Worse," Imani said. "Truth. Where?" "Here," Imani answered, tapping the desk. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. No hotel, no backdrop. Our corkboard and our tables and whatever chairs we can borrow. If they want a quote, they can come to the room that exists when their cameras turn off." Keisha grinned, feral and fond. "You say the word, I'll text the list that still knows the difference between reporting and reposting." "Do it," Imani said. "But invite the neighborhood blog first. The one that spelled Tariq's name right last spring. If I'm going to be on the record, I want the record to be local." Her phone buzzed. In the car outside, Malik wrote, "Thermos and patience. Do you need anything from a man in a suit? I also own jeans, but they're bad at boardrooms. I need microphones that don't die," she replied. "And someone who knows which extension cords in this building are possessed on it," he sent back. "I'll bring a small sound kit and leave my ego in the glove compartment." When she stepped out front at dusk, the air held that January metal taste, and the block lights hummed awake. The sedan idled across the street like a punctuation mark that refused to choose its sentence. Malik climbed out without theater, a canvas bag over his shoulder, a second man behind him carrying a coil of cable like a pet snake. "I come bearing technology and silence," he said. "And coffee, and the ability to look like furniture if that helps." "It helps if the furniture works," Imani said, lifting the canvas bag to test its weight. "We're doing this here tomorrow. 2. No step and repeat. No lectern. Just our space. Then I'll make sure the mics are boring and the speakers are faithful," he said. "Keisha, hi. I brought gaffer tape because the universe respects it." Keisha took the tape like communion. "You might live," she told him. "We'll see." Inside, they tested outlets until they found 2 that didn't crackle, ran a line to the back of the room, taped cords to the floor where no kid could trip, and positioned a small speaker so the back row wouldn't have to lean. Malik moved with the economy of someone who'd built stages most people only noticed when they failed. Imani watched the way he took instructions easily and gave them only when asked. He didn't try to rearrange furniture to flatter a lens. He didn't suggest a better backdrop. He asked where she wanted to stand and then made that spot sound like her own voice amplified. At 8, the last kid left with a wave and a bag of leftover clementines. At 8:30, the floor was clear, the cables neat, the chairs aligned in 3 honest rows. At 9, Keisha yawned on purpose and pointed at Imani's tote. Home, green, sleep, the city can wait till 2. On the sidewalk, Malik hesitated like a man filing a detail for later. "They'll ask about us," he said, not coy, not dramatic. "They'll try to make it the headline." "They'll ask about us," Imani agreed. "I'll answer with the mission. And if they keep asking, I'll answer with the rules. I don't need to hide to be clear. I just need to choose my words," he nodded. "Do you want me in the frame or out of it?" "Out," she said. "Back of the room. If I look for you, it'll be to check that the mic is on, not for permission." "I can be a green light without being a signal," he said, almost smiling. "Text me if the building sprouts new demons overnight." "Go home," she said. "Eat something that didn't come from a meeting." "Copy," he said and meant it. Back in her apartment, the quiet felt like a muscle she could finally unclench. She wrote the bones of what she would say, not an apology, not a manifesto, a ledger of who they were and what they built, a story with names that didn't belong to headlines. She read it aloud once to the plant on the windowsill and again to the ceiling, trimming any line that sounded like a plea. She set an alarm and a second one, texted Nana 2 o'clock tomorrow. Here. No foolishness, and Nana replied, I have a hat for foolishness just in case. She smiled into her pillow at that, and let sleep come the way a promise does when you've finally said it out loud. Across town, a conference table not built for mercy held 3 phones playing the same clip on loop. A producer practiced a smirk. A host practiced concern. Someone in a different office drafted a segment title with alliteration. Somewhere else, Reginald Sinclair turned a page in a report and didn't read the words because the picture in his head had shifted by 1 degree he couldn't name. In the morning, Imani would iron the shirt with the small fray at the cuff she liked for its honesty, drink water before coffee, and stand in a room that made sense to her. The microphones would hum the right kind of hum. The kids' drawings would be the only backdrop. The first question would try to pull her into a story she did not write, and she would tell the truth in the place built to hold it. Morning arrived like a drumline, steady, insistent, impossible to ignore. Imani ironed the white shirt with the soft fray at the cuff because honesty reads even when nobody notices. She drank water before coffee because stamina is a leadership style. She packed the tote with legal pads, spare markers, a stapler that only jammed when you lied to it, and a folder labeled receipts because sometimes the truth deserves paperwork. She texted Keisha on my way. Doors at noon. Neighborhood blog first and Nana Ruth pray for microphones and common sense. Nana replied, You can have one guaranteed. I'll work on the other. The center smelled like clean floor and citrus wipes when she unlocked it. Keisha arrived with folding chairs that had survived decades of other good ideas. They set 3 rows facing the corkboard of kids' drawings, stick figure families with sky blue backgrounds, bold letters that said, You belong here, a crayon rendering of a van that looked like hope on wheels. By 11, Malik slipped through the side door wearing the kind of black sweater that turns a man into a shadow when he needs to be one. He nodded hello. She nodded back. He unpacked the small sound kit with the reverence of someone who'd seen bad audio ruin justice. The first test squealed. Keisha rolled her eyes. Malik adjusted gain and swung the mic stand a fist width from where Imani planned to stand. The next test hummed like obedience. 2 o'clock, Keisha said, consulting a clipboard that had learned to fear her. We'll open the door at 12 for setup and seating. Neighborhood blog gets front row. City outlets get what's left. Anyone who calls you plucky goes in the back. We'll have a sign-in sheet because if they misquote you, we're sending them their handwriting in the correction request. Imani smiled without showing teeth. We are not the show. We are the record. At 12:15, Ramon from the neighborhood blog walked in carrying a Canon older than some of his interns and an extra charger because he understood community is just redundancy you love. Ms. Carter, he said, tapping the brim of an imaginary hat. You look like truth wrapped in starch. How you feeling? Hungry, she said, which means focused. By 1, a pair of local reporters took their seats. A radio stringer tested her own recorder, and a cameraman from a mid-market TV station grinned at Keisha in a way that suggested he had siblings who'd taught him manners. By 1:30, the glossy outlets arrived with hair and lighting and that particular entitlement that mistakes familiarity for access. They signed in. Keisha pointed to the second and third rows. An online magazine editor's mouth twitched like she'd been told no for the first time this week. Good. At 1:45, Imani stood alone in the office for 60 seconds and placed her palms flat on the desk. Tell it before they sell it, she whispered to the laminate, and the desk, having heard worse, offered its quiet. 2 o'clock came like a door opening. Keisha stepped to the front. Ground rules, she said, voice crisp. We're here, so we're respecting here. No roaming shots past row 3. No filming kids work close enough to read names. You'll raise hands and wait to be called. You'll identify your outlet for the record. If you break those rules, you leave. If you argue, I will embarrass you on camera. We clear? A few chuckled. A few bristled. Everyone nodded. Imani stepped up. The room settled the way a classroom settles when the person you trust starts speaking. She didn't take the mic off the stand because her hands were for telling stories, not amplifying them. My name is Imani Carter, she said. I founded Roots and Rise because I have never met a child whose life fit neatly in a headline. Our work is mentorship, tutoring, safe rides, and the kind of predictable care that helps a nervous system unlearn alarm. If you want to know who I am, start here. She told them about Neela. who mailed herself brochures because she liked the look of her name next to admitted. But she added what headlines never do. The morning Nyla overslept after closing at her job and still made it to the center because routine is a muscle, not a miracle. She told them about Tariq, who fell in love with Resilient, but also how he stalled on multiplying fractions when the room got loud. So they made a quiet hour at 7, and he bloomed like he'd been waiting for permission. She spoke numbers gently but firmly. Attendance upticks, homework completion, bus pass budgets, and then she moved to the spine that held it all up. "I am 20, she said. "My parents died when I was a teenager. I was raised by Nana Ruth and Granddad Earl, who taught me that receipts and prayers can live in the same book. Our center is small on purpose. Small lets us learn names. We accept money that aligns with our kids' futures, and we refuse money that asks us to play dress-up with their reality. We are not a photo op. We are a commitment. If you'd like to talk about me, start with the keys I carry. They open this room." Ramon's camera clicked like a respectful metronome. Keisha's pen tapped the clipboard twice, her signal that the foundation had cured. Imani nodded to the hands. "Lydia Chen, City Ledger." "Ms. Carter, are you dating Malik Sinclair?" Imani didn't flinch. "I'm partnering with people who match our values," she said. "Some of those partners care about me personally. None of them decide our mission. Our mission decides itself by need. We're here to talk about Roots and Rise. Next question. Darren Pike, Metro Now. There are concerns your relationship could compromise donor independence or create a pipeline of influence. Independence means the work runs on its own goals, not someone else's optics," Imani said. "We have a board. We have bylaws. We publish our outcomes. We do not rename programs for anyone's legacy. If you're asking whether we'll trade kids' futures for press releases, the answer is no." Next. Amara Wilson, The Borough Beat. "How can the public help without making it about themselves? Concrete, please." Imani's smile reached her eyes. "You can help by showing up consistently. Sign up to mentor not just once, not just in December. You can help by funding bus passes and van insurance. Transport is destiny. You can help by hiring our teenagers for summer work and paying them real wages. You can help by not using our kids' stories to sell your brand. If you want to put your name on something, put it on a schedule." In the second row, the online magazine editor raised a manicured hand without waiting to be called. Keisha looked at the hand the way one looks at a raccoon in daylight. Imani nodded anyway. The woman didn't bother with an outlet. "Some would say you're out of your depth, too young, too untested, now too visible. Why not step back until the noise dies? Because the kids don't pause their lives while adults learn to behave," Imani said. "Noise has never built a bridge, work does. If I step back, I leave them in a gap someone else dug. We keep our promises here." Next. A man from the TV station lifted his mic. "Would you say you're in love, Ms. Carter?" A ripple of something unkind moved through the room. Imani took half a breath. "I would say that love, if it's real, shows up as responsibility. And we have responsibilities stacked to the ceiling. Today's story is simple: who we serve, how we serve them, and how you can serve alongside us. If you came for romance, I suggest a different time slot." Laughter, some appreciative, some chastened, loosened the edges of the crowd. In the back, Malik stood still as a pillar, eyes on the soundboard, not her. His presence was ballast, not spotlight. Imani called on Ramon. "Ramon, Harlem Neighborhood News. Will you expand hours if support increases? And how do families weigh in on changes?" "Yes," she said. "We'll expand as mentors do. This is not an announcement machine. This is a listening post. Our families are on our advisory council. We poll them before we alter schedules. If the community doesn't bless the change waits." A hand she didn't recognize, Sonia Perez, WPR, asked about measurable outcomes versus immeasurable ones. Imani answered with both. Graduation rates and slower heartbeats, GPAs, and the way Tariq spoke louder when he knew someone would still be there at 7. She ended not with a flourish but with an invitation. "If you want a quote," she said, "you already have one. A zip code should not decide the size of your future. If you want a story, we have a sign-up sheet in the back. Volunteers, donors, summer employers. Choose a box. Then choose a Saturday. We'll be here when your camera isn't." She stepped back. Keisha took the mic to lay out logistics. Malik powered down channels in a sequence that spared the speaker's feelings. The room exhaled. Reporters lined up for one-on-ones. Imani gave 5. Ramon first, as promised, then the burro beat, then the radio stringer who asked if she could record ambient noise because she liked the sound of paper and pencil and kids. She declined 3 requests for a quick shot outside and 1 for fun candids with the board. Fun, she had learned, is a word that shows up right before someone eats your boundaries. By 3:30, the room thinned. The TV crew thanked Keisha for the rules. The online editor left with a frown that meant she'd try to make a second-day angle mean. The neighborhood blog posted first, a clean headline, a photo of the corkboard, a caption that read she insisted on names. 10 minutes later, a clip of Imani's answer about love bubbled through timelines with the audio balanced and the comments less mean than usual. 30 minutes later, the small donor page ticked from 285 to 4,560 in 15-cent increments that built like applause you could spend on gasoline and graph paper. A councilwoman's staffer wrote asking for a meeting. A church deacon offered Wednesday night volunteers. A barbershop on 138th DM'd to say they had 3 mentors if she had 3 boys who needed haircuts and algebra. At 4, when the last reporter left and the sign-in sheet sat fat with ugly signatures, Imani let herself sit on the edge of a table. Malik approached with the careful aura of a man returning borrowed air. "You were clear," he said softly. "They couldn't twist it without showing their hands." "I hope they show their hands," she said. "Then we'll know where not to sit." "Your mic technique was perfect," he added, because he knew praise sticks better when it lands on craft. "And your line about schedules instead of nameplates, that's going to live longer than today." Keisha breezed past, collecting tape. "He's right," she said. "Also, the internet is being not terrible. We've got small donors multiplying like loaves and fishes, and the landlord ghosted me, but a different owner emailed about a South Bronx space we can see Friday if we want." Imani's heart did a strange, careful thing, like it had set a box on a shelf and was surprised to find a new one in its place. "We'll vet it," she said. "We don't move because someone offers. We move because it fits." As if summoned by the word fit, a text pinged from an unknown number, introduced itself as Vanessa Whitaker, and requested a meeting to clarify intentions. Keisha looked at the name, raised both eyebrows, and muttered, "Here comes the circle with rules." Imani typed back, "If you have something to offer the kids, you can email Keisha details. If you have something to say to me personally, you can say it here in this room Friday at 10. No entourages." Vanessa responded with a single word that surprised Imani enough to show on her face. "Agreed." Malik caught the flicker. "Problem? Possibly a solution in expensive shoes," Imani said, sliding the phone away. "We'll see if she can walk." The afternoon softened at the edges. Parents picked up kids with thanks that landed like anchors. The block returned to its regular programming. A man selling DVDs from a backpack, a woman laughing into a scarf, a bus exhaling. Imani stacked chairs with Keisha and refused to let Malik carry the heaviest ones because fairness starts with furniture. When the room looked like itself again, they stood by the door, 3 people watching a small piece of city take a deeper breath. "Dinner?" Keisha asked, already knowing the answer. "Home," Imani said. "Greens, sleep. Tomorrow we count what changed. Then we build on it." Malik lingered a second longer than politeness requires, but shorter than neediness begs. "You don't need me to walk you," he said, offering the choice without the insult of insistence. "I need you to be where you said you'd be tomorrow," she said. "In a boardroom with a spine." He dipped his head, the promise sliding in under his collar like a vow. "Text first?" "Text first," she echoed. On the way home, the city read her different. Not softer. Cities don't soften. But with a new kind of respect that comes when you refuse to trade your voice for volume. She passed a storefront TV playing her clip on loop with a caption that, for once, didn't make her flinch. She passed a barbershop where a boy argued about the Knicks with a man who pretended to disagree, so the boy could practice his voice. She passed a church bulletin board advertising choir practice and coat drives, and a summer job fair that would need more employers than last year, and maybe, if the day kept unfolding like this, would have them. Across town, in a room where the skyline looked like a possession, Reginald Sinclair watched a silent replay on a tablet, expression unreadable. Beside him, an assistant cleared his throat and said, "The coverage is better than expected." Reginald didn't answer. He was inventorying something rarer than leverage, evidence. He watched the way Imani refused to be baited, and the way the room behaved itself under her rules, and he thought, against habit, about outcomes that don't fit on quarterly reports. At home, Imani hung the ironed shirt on a chair, texted Nana mix worked. Common sense showed up in patches. We did not embarrass your prayers, and got back I will thank the Lord and the electrician. She laughed out loud, tasted the day's salt and sweet, and opened her notebook to add a new heading. Teach the city how to behave here. Under it she wrote 3 words, we did, today. Her phone buzzed once. Malik, texting first. Board meeting at 9. I'll argue for outcomes, not optics. You turned a room into a standard. I plan to borrow it. She stared at the message a beat longer than a reply requires, then wrote back, standards travel. So do spines. Read the board packet twice. And eat first. He sent a photo of a sandwich like a man who understood compliance as a love language. Night slid over the boroughs. The internet kept humming, less cruel, more curious, while small donations stacked like bricks you could build with. Somewhere a landlord weighed risk against reputation and felt the scale tip for the first time. Somewhere a girl named Nyla fell asleep under a brochure she hadn't dared to tape up yet. Somewhere a boy named Tariq whispered resilient into his pillow and believed it because the room with the corkboard existed, because the woman with the keys had said it in public, because sometimes the city listens when you speak in your own house. Tomorrow would bring the boardroom and the father and the kind of choice you can't buy your way around. Tonight brought leftovers, texts that ended before sentiment turned to sugar, a quiet thank you to ceilings that hold, and sleep that didn't ask for permission. The Sinclair Group boardroom made the skyline look domesticated, glass-harnessed and obedient. At 8:57 a.m., Malik stood at the far end of the table with a legal pad and the board packet marked in ink the color of decisions. He'd eaten. He'd read twice. He'd texted first, walking in. Outcomes, not optics. And Imani had replied, stand straight. Speak plain. Leave if they ask you to lie. He slid the phone face down and let his shoulders remember track. Set. Not stiff. Directors filtered in wearing the weather of their wings. Miriam Okafor, CFO, with a pen like a wand. Trevor Blaine, PR, trailing cologne and caution. Ana Delgado, general counsel, clipped and precise. 2 independent members who measured risk the way tailors measure inseams. And finally Reginald Sinclair, who didn't sit so much as claim the chair into silence. Reginald rapped a knuckle once. We'll begin. Pages turned, water poured, the ritual orchestra tuning before the first note. Item 1, he said. Reputational posture. Trevor cleared his throat. We're seeing a 2-day bounce on brand sentiment post-press conference. Ms. Carter's clip plays clean. If we get in front of it with a values-forward statement, carefully drafted, we can convert curious into favorable. Convert it into what exactly? Miriam asked without looking up. Tweets aren't deposits. They're risk buffers, Trevor said. If we don't engage, we look cold. If we over-engage, we look calculating. There's a middle. Sinclair supports community-led solutions. We're not writing copy for a feeling, Malik said, voice even. We're deciding whether we back work that breathes on its own. Reginald turned his head a degree. You requested the floor, Malik. Take it. Malik slid a 1-page document across the table, the only page in the building that didn't need a binder. Transit and Time Initiative sat at the top, subheaded Unrestricted Microgrants to NYC after-school programs for transportation and consistent adult hours. 2 columns, money and measurables, no photos, no mock-ups. We create a ring-fenced fund inside our foundation, Malik said. We commit a pilot sum now, match small dollar donations 1.1 and recruit 3 independent advisors from organizations that look like the city. He tapped the left column. Unrestricted because buses and vans don't care about our press releases. We pay for time, adults showing up when the kids do. He tapped the right. Outputs are public and boring on purpose. Van miles logged, mentor hour consistency, retention by cohort, not just homework completion. Quarterly reporting, open-sourced, no naming rights, no step and repeat. We're not buying billboards on a nonprofit's wall. Trevor made a face like he'd bitten a lemon and wished it were a lime. If we spend without a photo, how do people see us? They see results, Miriam said, scratching a note. Which historically has spent better than Trevor. Anna folded her hands. Conflict controls. Hard firewall, Malik said. Any program connected to me personally recuses me from grant decisions. Roots and Rise can apply alongside anyone else. If selected, I'm out of the room. Advisory votes posted publicly. Grantees can't be used in our advertising, ever. One director leaned forward. And the personal matter? Malik didn't blink. My personal life isn't on today's agenda. Our decision is whether we behave like a company that understands the difference between charity and change. If we want to keep pretending PR is strategy, we can. Or we can pilot something that treats neighborhoods as partners, not props. Trevor glanced at Reginald. The Whitaker family, given our long-standing ties, expects signals of continuity. A foundation dinner is scheduled. Seating charts? We're not a seating chart, Malik said, but softer, so the sentence landed without breaking glass. Reginald steepled his fingers. You are proposing we spend against what cannot be photographed. You are proposing we do so while the name Sinclair appears in headlines that make editors salivate. You are proposing we trust your judgment while you are close to one applicant. I'm proposing we act like the money understands its purpose, Malik said. I'm proposing the fund is run by rules that outlive me, and I'm proposing we stop outsourcing our conscience to our PR shop. Silence stretched, testing the beams. Then Miriam, without ceremony, I support a pilot. It's cheap compared to a quarter-point interest swing and worth more in neighborhoods we pretend we care about. And the metrics are clean. She looked at Trevor like a doctor looks at a stubborn symptom. We can survive a quarter without a glossy, while we figure out if we can buy something rarer than attention. Trust. Anna nodded once. With council input on governance and conflicts, I'm in. One independent shrugged. It's a bet on boring. Boring saves companies. Trevor tried again. If we refuse to at least issue a photographed handshake with a representative partner, we cede the narrative to are some people who do the work? Malik offered. Good. Let them narrate. Reginald watched his son with the expression he wore when the market did something both inevitable and irritating. A pilot, he said finally. $2 million. Board seat oversight on the advisory committee selection. Public quarterly reports. Your recusal on any file connected to Miss Carter is mandatory. And you, he added, eyes narrow, do not turn up on page 6. My life is not a column, Malik said evenly. And I'll take the pilot. But I want one more condition written here, not implied in a hallway. We will not punish or pressure any program for refusing our cameras. That includes Roots and Rise. If they say no to a photo, the grant stands. Trevor sputtered. Then what do we get? Outcomes, Miriam repeated, now smiling with only her eyes. A novelty. Reginald's mouth tightened. Fine. A murmur of paper, the movement of pens. Weak tea victory maybe, but hot enough to hold. Malik felt the old 400 settle in his legs. Not the gun, not the finish, the second curve where your lungs inform you of your honesty. He let breath in, measured. Next item, Reginald said, flipping a tab. Personal risk mitigation. Miss Carter's university may prefer distance until the noise abates. We have contacts. A leave of absence? No, Malik said before the word could pretend to be benevolence. We don't broker a woman's life through back channels because optics make you itch. If the university wants to speak to Miss Carter, they can speak to her. Not her boyfriend. Not the company he works for. Her. Anna's pen paused midair. She hid a smile like a habit. Trevor sighed into his tie. Miriam stopped writing and looked straight at Reginald in the way people do when they are tired of mistaking etiquette for ethics. Reginald set the tab down. You are young enough to confuse defiance with virtue, he said, not raising his voice. But you have earned one trial. Do not spend it recklessly. Neither should you, Malik said, and felt almost physically a stitch loosen in the room. They voted the pilot through with caveats stacked like coasters. Malik signed the recusal sheet for any file with Roots and Rise in the first 5 lines. He gathered his few pages. When the meeting adjourned, Reginald did not dismiss him. He let the room empty until father and son faced the windows together, the city's shoulders thrown broad. In 26 years, Reginald said, I have taught you how to stand where the room listens. Today you used it on me. I used it for something, Malik answered. On days like this you pick a side or it picks you. Reginald studied the glass. The Whitakers will be displeased. They'll survive, Malik said, not cruel. So will we. And Miss Whitaker? Reginald's tone flicked, testy as a cable. She is efficient. She understands continuity. Continuity is how people stay lost, Malik said. I'm not marrying a seating chart. A beat of dangerous stillness, then a nod that could have been a flinch if it belonged to a lesser man. If your pilot fails, we do it my way. If the pilot fails, we fix it, Malik said. If your way means buying headlines off kids' backs, we don't. He left before the echo learned his name, texted out, then pilot approved. Recusal filed. No branding. No photos demanded. Outcomes public. Imani wrote back, good. Guardrails matter more than applause. Eat. He smiled. Obedience as intimacy. And sent a photo of a cafeteria apple that looked like it had aspirations. Try again. She replied. And he returned with a bowl that contained vegetables and a protein that respected itself. Better. He spent the next 2 hours with Miriam and Anna, turning guardrails into clauses. No testimonial demands. No VIP nights in exchange for access. Advisory council chosen from 3 orgs Imani had never named because integrity is sometimes the absence of fingerprints. He suggested one more rule he didn't plan to mention out loud. No grants contingent on a leader stepping aside for optics. Anna underlined it. Miriam said, we should have written that 10 years ago. On the sidewalk, winter sliced the air thin. Malik cut across to a deli that knew him as turkey on wheat no mayo, and asked the owner if he could put a flyer up for mentors. You gonna mentor? The owner asked. Yes, Malik said, quietly. The owner nodded like he'd been handed the right change. He typed a message and erased the first draft because it read like a press release. The second one read like a man speaking plain. We can match small donors 1.1 for transit and time. Advisors are independent. No cameras. You'll be recused from any decision touching R&R. If you choose to apply, do it because you want the work to breathe, not because of me. If you don't, I'll still be in your back row with the cables. Imani's reply came after 10 minutes that felt like a useful ache. We'll apply when the application opens with the same form as everyone else. If we're chosen, good. If not, also good. Work continues. Also, the South Bronx space tour is Friday at 9. If you come, be furniture, I am oak, he sent. Be folding chair, she corrected. Lighter to move. At dusk, the clip from the press conference kept making small, clean circles through people's phones. The landlord still ghosted. The new owner still wanted a tour. The volunteer coordinator idea had sprouted a name. Daryl, Keisha's cousin, a union shop steward who could talk to anybody without making them feel managed. Vanessa's agreed sat in Imani's inbox like a sharp object wrapped in velvet. Around 8, Malik's screen lit with his father's name. He considered not answering. He answered. You won your pilot, Reginald said without preface. No, Malik said. The kids did. A soft exhale. Not approval, not quite. Don't embarrass this company. Malik thought of Imani standing in a room where she'd made the rules, of the corkboard and the van drawn like a halo on wheels, of a boy whispering resilient into cotton. Then let the company behave, he said and ended the call. He texted Imani once more, texting first. Can I swing by early morning with coffee for Keisha and a screwdriver for the mic stand that squeaked on channel 2? I'll be furniture, per spec 7:30, back door. No talking until 8, she wrote, copy he sent, and set an alarm he hadn't needed since track meets, when you had to be awake before daylight and nerves to remember the point of a lap. That night, the city made the sounds it makes when it's about to try again. Delivery trucks sighing, radiators clanking like old men's jokes, sirens that weren't for you, laughter that was. In a room where glossy magazines practiced disappointment, someone typed a headline that didn't bite as hard. In a room where metrics were promises, Miriam wrote the words boring on purpose in a margin and drew a box around them. In a room where rules matter because kids do, Imani turned a page and outlined tomorrow like a liturgy. Roll call, fractions, bus passes, mentoring pairs, then lay down with the clean fatigue of an earned day and the steadier breath of a future that, for once, felt like a thing you could schedule. By 7:27 a.m., the block still wore its sleep and the streetlights kept their small vigil when Malik slipped through the back door with a screwdriver, 2 coffees, and a promise to be quiet. Keisha, already there with a roll of sign-up forms and a stare that had trained entire classrooms, cracked the door an inch and took 1 cup without saying good morning because mornings are for tasks. Channel 2 squeaks when you breathe on it, she said. If you make it stop, I will name a chair after you. I aspire to furniture, Malik said, dealing to the mic stand like a man proposing to the idea of utility. He adjusted, tightened, tested. The squeak died. The hum settled. Keisha wiped a non-existent fleck from the base with a rag she kept for victory. "Acceptable," she said, which in her language meant "thank you. You may live." Imani arrived at 7:31 with a notebook, a bun that said she'd slept, and a text already lighting her phone. "Dean Abramson would like to see you at 10 a.m. She showed Keisha the screen. Keisha's eyebrow traveled high enough to see over policy. "You want muscle?" "I want a witness," Imani said. "But I want you here more at 10 than there. We've got church volunteers touring the mentoring sign-up and Daryl shadowing snack. I can take notes. Record if they let you," Keisha said. "Ask for policy in writing if they don't." At 9:30, she walked across campus past posters advertising a poetry slam and a venture capital panel that used the word disrupt like a birthright. The dean's office smelled like good wood and better intentions. A receptionist with immaculate penmanship wrote Ms. Carter on a visitor sticker as if the cursive might soften whatever came next. When the door opened, Dean Abramson stood with both hands visible, practiced kindness set to the key of institution. "Imani," he said, motioning toward a chair that had seen many young people's first grown conversations. "Thank you for coming in on short notice." "It's my school," she said, sitting. "Short notice is the only notice students get." He smiled the way administrators smile when they know you're not wrong. "You've had quite a week. First, I want to acknowledge the pressures. And your press conference was—" He searched for a word that wouldn't commit him to anything. "Clear." "Thank you," she said, "because the room required a word and that one was cheap. I'll be plain," he continued, folding his fingers in a shape that meant careful. "Visibility of this kind can be destabilizing on campus. I have donors who, well, you know how stories travel. There's concern that the media attention might intrude on your studies and on our ability to ensure a focused academic environment. A brief leave of absence, purely voluntary, might allow things to cool. You return in the fall refreshed. No penalty, of course." Imani set her pen down. "Dean Abramson, I'm in good academic standing. I haven't missed a class. I'm not under any disciplinary action. The attention isn't something I asked for, or something I'm using this campus to generate. If the university has a policy that applies to my situation, please cite it and provide it in writing. If not, I'll stay enrolled and on schedule. I don't take voluntary suggestions that protect optics instead of students." He held her gaze. To his credit, he didn't flinch. "No one's accusing you of misconduct. We're trying to protect you." "From my education?" she asked softly. "From finishing what I started?" "From damage you didn't invite," he said. "Sometimes we, institutions, can absorb it for you." "With all respect, the institution doesn't absorb it," she said. "Girls like me do. We always have. If you want to protect me, enforce the rules that already exist against harassment and interference. And if a donor has questions, I'm happy to meet them here on campus in daylight with you present. I won't vanish because someone with a check is uncomfortable." Something in his face loosened, regret maybe at how many times he'd watched conversations like this go differently. "I hear you," he said, and she believed that he did. "I will put our position in writing. No leave required, continued support point of contact if media intrudes on campus life. And I'll remind our partners that the university does not broker students' personal lives." "Thank you," she said, and stood. "One more thing, if anyone reaches out to you about me, company, family, press, please direct them to me. I'm the authority on my choices." "Understood," he said, and as she turned the knob, he added almost like a secret, "For what it's worth, Miss Carter, your conference?" Faculty were sending it around, not just the clip. The whole thing. Outside, winter sharpened her lungs into instruments that knew how to play stamina. She texted Keisha, "No leave." In writing. Keisha sent back 15 exclamation points and a photo of Daryl showing 2 volunteers how to stack clementines into a pyramid without bruising them. Then a second text. Malik dropped off a box of cable ties and left like a ghost. He might be useful, unfortunately. Imani, unfortunately, is doing a lot of work there. "Keisha, I'm a professional. Don't me." She crossed Morningside Park, where a couple practiced wedding photos with a photographer who coaxed laughter out of cold teeth. Malik waited on a bench that faced the trees instead of the street, hands in his coat pockets like he was holding something that wanted to run. Maybe his temper, maybe his old life. He stood when he saw her and didn't reach for her as if reaching were owed. How'd it go? The dean tried to hand me a velvet exit. I handed it back, she said. Policy in writing. No leave. He smiled without showing teeth as if the day's light had decided to sit with him. Good, I brought. He lifted 2 paper cups from beside him. Tea, you like it when you remember. I remember when reminded, she said, taking one. Thank you. They walked the loop the long way, past a woman tossing crumbs to birds like rumors, past a kid kicking a soccer ball solo, all rhythm and hope. 2 men with cameras lingered half a block back, bored to patience. Malik adjusted their pace without calling attention to it. I read the comptroller's report, he said. And the Brennan Center piece. The gaps are a map I should have known. We can do something about the bus pass problem fast. We can do something about it right, she said. Fast only if right is invited. Your pilot matters. The guardrails matter more. If I apply, I'm a line item, not your narrative. Recusal's already on paper, he said. Miriam underlined it. Twice. They were quiet for a stretch that didn't pretend to be anything else. At the top of the hill, the city arrived all at once. Brownstone shoulders and glass ambitions. Imani sipped her tea and spoke without ceremony. We have Friday at 9 to see a South Bronx space. If it fits, we'll need a lawyer who understands leases written to look friendly, and a contractor who won't talk down to me. You can bring both, but if either of them calls me kiddo, I'll ask them to leave. I'll bring Ana Delgado from council, he said. She calls everyone by their full name. And a contractor my Nana trusts, which is a higher standard than any degree I've ever earned. Good, she said. At 10, I told Vanessa Whitaker she could meet me here. No entourage. If she wants to help, she can say how. If she wants to warn me again, she can practice doing it with less perfume. Malik huffed a laugh. She'll come shiny. She always does. She's also not a cartoon. She can read a room when she's not being asked to star in it. I'm not an audience, Imani said. She'll figure that out or she won't. They circled down toward the lower path where trees made a kind of privacy out of branches and habit. One camera tried for an angle. Malik stepped where the shot got boring. Imani tossed her cup and shifted the conversation to work. Mentor recruitment from barbershops and union halls, Saturday hours that didn't punish kids with weekend jobs, a parent advisory with real teeth. Malik listened like he was memorizing rather than waiting to speak. When he did, it was to offer something unglamorous. I can underwrite van insurance quietly for the first quarter. Through the fund or personally, your choice. Clean with paperwork. Through the fund best, she said. Public boring trackable. Paperwork or it didn't happen. They paused where the path opened into a field of winter grass. The city was a chorus they could hear but didn't have to conduct. Are we doing this? Malik asked. Not about leases or pilot funds, not even about them. About this. The fight, the speed, the refusal to accept someone else's genre. We're doing it, she said. We fight on our own timeline. We won't be bullied into speeding up or shamed into slowing down. We build where the kids can find us, he nodded. Then I'll stop asking if I should be here and start showing up proportionate to the work. From the road above, a black car idled. Behind the tinted glass, Reginald Sinclair watched them stand in the cold without theatrics. A man and a woman talking logistics where other people would pose. He'd told himself he was in the park for the driver's sake, a detour to avoid midtown gridlock. He'd told himself he didn't do curiosity, yet there he was measuring something he hadn't budgeted for. His son at ease without a grin, a young woman refusing a script, the absence of spectacle where tabloids had wished for one. Pull around, he said, and the driver, trained in the art of unsaid reasons, obeyed. As the car moved, Reginald's reflection caught his eye, the outline of a man who knew how to own a room, surprised to find himself admiring a bench. Back at the center, the day translated into the language that had been carrying people long before press conferences existed. Roll call, fractions, spelling lists, snack counts, the soft thunder of kids being loud and the safety of expectations. A church group arrived with 5 volunteers. Daryl diagrammed mentoring pairs on a whiteboard and assigned a veteran to each newcomer because nobody learns a room by being thrown into it. Nyla taped a brochure to the corkboard at last, not in the center, off to the side, modest as a secret that had decided to live in daylight. Tariq wrote resilient in block letters and underlined each syllable like a beat. At 4, a campus email landed. To Ms. Imani Carter. Re-meeting summary. The dean kept his promise in tidy paragraphs. No leave recommended. Support services available. Point of contact for media interference. Affirmation that students' personal associations are not grounds for disciplinary action. Imani forwarded it to Keisha with a subject line that said, "Receipts," and to herself because archives are just memory that understands future courtrooms. At 6, Malik texted a photo of the drafted Transit and Time webpage. No glossy, just a form, a description that read boring on purpose, and the words "no photos required." "Soft launch tonight, public tomorrow if you bless," he wrote. She read it twice and replied, "Bless, fix the comma in the third line." He wrote back, "Fixed. The wrath I fear is not my father's. It is your grammar." She allowed herself a one-syllable laugh in an empty office, and then went back to counting pencils because children cannot multiply without a thing to write with. At 8, the mentoring sign-up hit 100 names, half of which were people Keisha would prune because helpful is not the same as reliable. The small donor match switch flipped. 35s became 70, 100 became 200, bus passes became inevitabilities lined up like miles. Anna sent a text confirming Friday's walkthrough with the building owner. No cousin deals, no handshake clauses, full inspection, the kind of lease that tells the truth in its footnotes. Imani replied with gratitude measured in syllables and the instruction she gave anyone orbiting her mission. Bring paperwork. Wear shoes you can stand in. Near 9, the street outside the center thinned. Imani and Keisha stacked chairs to the kind of music you hear when your back is a metronome. Scrape, lift, click. "Tomorrow," Keisha said, "we teach the city how to write checks for vans. And we make Daryl a schedule that could run a small country." "Tomorrow," Imani said, "we listen first. The neighborhood will tell us the order." Her phone buzzed. Unknown became Vanessa Whitaker again. "Confirmed for 10 a.m. I will come alone. I would like to be of use." Imani stared at the sentence the way a carpenter eyes a piece of wood, testing for warps. 10. Here, no perfume cloud. "Wear flats," she typed, then erased the last line and sent only the first 2 words. She didn't need to choreograph the test. On her walk home, the city had the soft fatigue of a boxer's corner. A bus sighed. A corner bodega swept its step. A man sang to nobody like a hymn got lost and found him anyway. The day felt held, not conquered. That was enough. Across town, in a kitchen that had raised a man who liked rules, Reginald stood at a window and admitted to himself silently, like contraband, that he wanted to see the inside of that room in the South Bronx, not to appraise it, but to understand the gravity that had rearranged the week. He poured water, then put the glass down untouched, as if he'd asked a question he wasn't yet ready to hear picked up. Imani reached her building and paused with her hand on the knob, the old ritual that had become a vow. "Mission first," she said to the empty hallway. And the hallway, used to oaths and leases and groceries, kept her secret like a friend. Upstairs she wrote Friday at the top of a page and drew 2 lines beneath it. 9, space. 10, Vanessa. Beneath that, without thinking, she wrote 11, breathe. She smiled at her own presumption and left it. Schedules, like spines, improve with deliberate use. Night tucked the burrows in with its usual racket. The internet still hummed, less hungry, more watchful. The fun page ticked up by 10s, then 20s, then 100 from someone named Jay Whitaker that Keisha screenshotted and sent with 50 question marks before deleting the message and muttering, "Let the Lord keep my mouth." Somewhere a professor drafted a recommendation letter she'd been meaning to write since September. Somewhere a contractor set an early alarm because Nana had vouched for this job, and Nana's word outranked money. Somewhere a kid underlined resilient and fell asleep sure that the room would be unlocked tomorrow, because it always was. Because a woman with keys had told the city to behave and, miracle of miracles, the city had listened. If only for a day. At 8:59, the South Bronx block still wore last night's grit. A bakery waking up one tray at a time, the number 6 rattling overhead like a promise it intended to keep. The building was a former credit union with honest bones. A deep front room, a side office with a window to the street, a back corridor that might be an egress if the city agreed it was. Imani arrived with a notebook and a tape measure. Ana Delgado from council arrived with a folder thick enough to be taken seriously. The contractor, Isaiah Brooks, Nana vouched union card in his wallet, arrived with a laser level and the patience of a man who'd been talked down to before and learned to outlast it. Malik slipped in last by the side door. A backpack with snacks, water, a voltage tester, gaffer tape, and his vow to be furniture. Morning, Imani said, already measuring the front room. Depth 42 feet to that column. We can get 2 teaching tables side by side. Walkway between, quiet corner there. Isaiah sighted the ceiling. Sprinklers are here and here, he said, tapping pipes with a knuckle. Heads are old, need certification, maybe replacement. 8 a bathroom doable in the back if the landlord gives us 6 more inches on that wall. HVAC's dinosaur-adjacent roof? He shrugged toward the ceiling. We'll look, Anna clicked a pen. Egress is my religion. Back corridor, does it open to an alley or a landlord's dream? Alley, Isaiah said. But the gate is rust for miles. Not for long, Anna said, already marking the lease draft. We require 2 means of egress, ADA compliance, right to make code-required modifications, landlord to deliver white box plus HVAC at their cost, remediation plan if environmental gets cute. Malik tucked himself against a column, holding the ladder when Isaiah climbed, catching tape measures, logging the boring miracles they would need, lumen counts, outlet placement, the exact height of a ramp so someone could roll in like they belonged. He didn't offer suggestions unless asked. When asked, he kept them small. Bus lines, he murmured, and Imani was already there. 2 within 3 blocks. Sidewalk wide enough to stage pickup. I want the front desk here so every kid who walks in sees a person first, not a sign. They found a second room up 2 steps and decided, without saying the word, that it would hold quiet hours and the kind of conversations that soften a hard day. They found a basement that Isaiah promised to treat like a crime scene until tested. Lead, mold, whatever else buildings keep from people who can't sue them properly. They stood in the doorway and watched the street wake. Parents with strollers, a woman pulling a cart of uniforms to a laundromat, a boy hopping over a crack like it owed him money. Lease term 12 months with right to renew, cap on rent increase, Anna said. No sneaky demolition clauses. Owner's name is Luis Cardenas, Imani said, flipping her notebook. Says he's flexible. I like flexible on paper. Flexible becomes firm under my red pen, Anna said, a small smile. I'll earn my keep. By 9:44, they had a list of what the space could be and what it had to be before it could be anything. At 9:50, Imani ran a palm along the front window where fingerprints turned light into texture. She could see the van drawing from the corkboard already, a real one pulling up, kids spilling out with the energy of arrival. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. Isaiah set the ladder down like an amen. 10 o'clock, Imani said, checking her watch. We're due back. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Isaiah, he corrected gently. Bring me the lease when it stops lying. Count on it, Anna said. And they split. Anna to her office, Isaiah to another job. Malik and Imani to the center where the door would open at 10 for whatever Vanessa Whitaker had decided to be today. Vanessa arrived at 9:59 alone. A simple coat, flats that could handle New York, a notebook in her hand instead of a purse that needed its own chair. She looked the room over, corkboard, scuffed floor, 3 rows of chairs like a promise, and her face did a small, visible thing, a recalibration. Thank you for seeing me, she said to Imani first, like she had been rehearsing that order. I owe you an apology. I came in here last time carrying a circle like a weapon. I watched your press conference. I listened to how you set rules and kept the room kind. I can do better than step back. I'm sorry. Imani didn't rescue her from the words. Thank you, she said. We're not in the business of collecting apologies. We're in the business of collecting reliability. What do you want? To be of use, Vanessa said, and she didn't look at Malik when she said it. She met Imani's eyes and held them. I can bring you introductions, but I'm aware that introductions come with ego. I can bring you money, but I will not put my name on your wall. I can bring you myself on a schedule under someone else's authority, even if that someone else is Keisha, who terrifies me as she should, Keisha. Perched on the edge of a table with the clipboard that had already judged the morning, lifted 2 fingers in greeting and offered no promises. Terms are posted, Imani said. If you help, you do it inside our rules. No cameras, no brand building on kids' backs, no using us to fix a personal storyline. If you give, do it through the Transit and Time Fund or directly for something unglamorous like van insurance. But if you do it without naming rights. If you show up, you're here every Wednesday. Not when the calendar happens to be empty. Vanessa nodded like each term unclenched something she'd been holding wrong. Good, specific works for me. Here is what I can commit today, within that frame. She opened her notebook. 1. I will route a 3-year gift through transit and time earmarked for van insurance unrestricted beyond that. Anonymous. No press. You don't owe me eye contact if you see me in a room. 2. I will recruit 20 mentors out of my network who can pass a background check and accept Wednesday nights under Keisha's supervision. I will aim for work schedules that make sense. Teachers, nurses on opposite shifts, grad students who need less handholding. 3. My family foundation has a print shop we use for Gala nonsense. It can print your bilingual materials, flyers, intake forms, permission slips. No logos, no Whitaker courtesy of, just what you need when you need it. 4. Childcare stipends for mentors who would show up if they could bring their own kids. I will pay those stipends through the fund if they'll allow it. If not, we'll find a legal, clean way. 5. Imani asked because every list that sounded good hid the line where the trick lived. 5. Vanessa said, not flinching. I will be here. Quiet jobs. Snack duty, attendance, copy machine wrestling, whatever Keisha says. If I miss a week without giving 36 hours notice, you can delete my number. Silence stood up between them, not heavy, earnest. Keisha slid off the table, came forward, and held out the clipboard. Wednesday, 4 to 7 p.m. You'll shadow Daryl for 2 weeks. You will learn names before you offer opinions. You will not say at my last nonprofit. You will not bring perfume that makes the room sneeze. You will bring comfortable shoes and humility. Vanessa took the clipboard like a fragile inheritance. Understood. Malik stayed where he was, back of the room, hands in pockets. He wasn't needed, which was the point. When Vanessa finally glanced his way, it was not a plea. It was a nod that acknowledged, you are not the subject here. We're touring a space at 9 on Fridays. We'll need flyers for the advisory council in Spanish and English by Monday, Imani said. You can prove your print shop isn't just for place cards. Consider it done, Vanessa said. Email me the copy by tonight. If you want a translator beyond Google, I'll pay for one. And I know a code inspector who has a soul. If he can't sign off, he won't. If he can, he will. He owes my grandmother 3 favors and her ghost collects. Name, number, conflict disclosures, Anna said from the doorway. Having circled back to drop off a revised term sheet like a Deus Ex Legal. I like souls. I love paperwork. Vanessa started to smile and then stopped herself as if the impulse had teeth. You have a good team, she said to Imani. I have the team I can afford and the team I can trust, Imani answered. Sometimes they overlap. Today is you asking to test the overlap. Then test me, Vanessa said. They did immediately. For an hour, Vanessa labeled manila folders until the ink bled on her fingers, folded flyers, fetched clementines, and watched the rhythm of the room without narrating it to herself. When a kid ran in late and blurted my bad like a reflex, she watched how Keisha redirected apology into presence. Grab a pencil. You're here now. And learned more about pedagogy than a dozen panel discussions could teach her. When Nyla needed a signature on a permission slip and her pen jammed, Vanessa borrowed Imani's, the one with bite marks, and signed her own name on the volunteer line instead. When Tariq asked what resilient meant, and then answered himself like a boy discovering mirrors he could trust, Vanessa smiled into her lap so he wouldn't think he had to perform to keep the sound going. Between tasks, Malik ducked out and came back with a box of cheap, perfect plastic bins because chaos dies when pencils have a home. He set them down near the supply shelf and didn't make a show of it. Vanessa clocked the move, filed it, said nothing. At noon, Imani sent Keisha to eat, sent Malik to fix an outlet that buzzed like a mosquito, and stood with Vanessa by the corkboard. The van drawing looked more real now that the South Bronx space had confessed its potential. You didn't ask what I want in return, Vanessa said quietly. I don't trade favors, Imani said. I trade standards. You'll ask me for something one day. If it fits the standard, we'll talk. If it doesn't, you'll know why, Vanessa nodded. For what it's worth, she said. The version of me that warned you off? She's useful in certain rooms. She keeps me from being eaten. But she's not the only version. And she exhaled once. Being the expected match is a job you can starve inside. Imani didn't soften. She understood. Then feed yourself on Wednesdays, she said. We serve snacks. Vanessa laughed, surprised into it. Copy. At 1:30, a text from Miriam Okafor to Malik. Fund page live. Small dollar match capped at $250K this quarter. No photos required line is already trending in internal chat, which is both funny and terrifying. He thumbed back, boring on purpose, then put the phone away because the room had rules that outlived dopamine. At 2:15, a message landed in Imani's inbox from Luis Cardenas. Willing to concede on HVAC and ADA build-out at landlord expense. Can meet Monday to review Anna's red lines. She forwarded it with 1 word to Anna, movement, and 2 to Isaiah, bring ladder. He sent back a photo of a ladder like a proud father. By 3, the day felt like a well-tuned instrument. Hum here, chord there. A solo when Nyla read a paragraph out loud that last month would have snagged on every comma. Vanessa wiped down tables with a diligence that suggested she'd once been told cleaning was beneath her, and had decided to tell that voice to sit down. Keisha handed her a dustpan like a diploma, and didn't say good job because the job wasn't done. She said, back next Wednesday, and Vanessa said, yes, and it counted more than any ribbon cutting ever will. At 4, parents filtered in with thanks that never stopped sounding like anchors. A barber from 138th dropped off 3 names for mentor slots and promised haircuts for first-day photos. A deacon from a church on Brook Avenue brought a sign-up sheet with 5 Wednesday volunteers and a tin of mac and cheese because love is sometimes butter. Malik ate a small scoop without pretending it counted as dinner. Vanessa took half a portion and closed her eyes once in what might have been prayer. Imani made sure the kids got the rest. When the room emptied, they stacked chairs, coiled cords, locked the cabinet with the good scissors. Vanessa wiped her hands and reached for her coat. Thank you for letting me be useful, she said to Imani. I'll email the print timeline tonight, and the mentors will come with references you don't have to chase. Good, Imani said. We'll see you Wednesday. Vanessa glanced at Malik like a woman acknowledging the existence of weather. Mr. Sinclair, Vanessa, he said. It was not a truce, not a war, just 2 people who had stopped mistaking each other for symbols. After she left, Malik leaned against the door frame and exhaled. That was unexpected. Useful, Imani corrected. Unexpected wears off. Useful pays rent. He looked at her, the kind of look that remembers why attraction isn't just spark. It's the habit of being impressed. You turned a rival into a volunteer. She turned herself, Imani said. I provided the clipboard. His phone buzzed. Reginald, dinner at 7. Come alone. Malik stared at the screen like it had asked him to swallow a marble. He typed, I'll be there, because some rooms you face on purpose. On her way out, Imani paused by the van drawing and pictured the front window of the South Bronx space reflecting a real one. She pictured transit and time paying for miles nobody would Instagram. She pictured Wednesday nights full of names, Vanessa among them, carrying juice boxes without making a production of carrying juice boxes. She pictured a boardroom with fewer caveats and more clauses that guarded what mattered. She pictured a father who had spent a lifetime being the room, maybe learning to be a guest. The day had closed one door, on a version of Vanessa, on a version of the story that would have kept Imani small, and opened 3 others. A lease bending toward honesty, a fund bent toward buses and time, a coalition that didn't require anyone to disappear to belong. Outside, the train rattled again overhead, a reliable thunder. Inside, on a table that had heard confessions and spelling lists in equal measure, Imani set tomorrow's clipboard in the center like a compass and turned out the lights. Certain the room would remember the direction when she was gone. You said dinner felt like a contract written in porcelain. At 7 sharp, a server lifted lids the way some people raise eyebrows, and Reginald Sinclair regarded his son across a table long enough to measure silence. You forced my board into an experiment, he said, not angry. Accounting. $2 million of boring. Boring on purpose, Malik answered. It buys time in buses. It buys adults showing up when kids do. We can afford boring. Reginald studied him, then set down his fork as if laying a bet. The Whitakers expect a narrative. You are building a mechanism. I am building a mechanism that refuses to eat the people it claims to serve, Malik said. If the Whitakers want to be part of that, they can. If they want a photo, they can buy a frame. Reginald's mouth twitched, either a near smile or a muscle learning a new trick. And Miss Carter? She won't be traded, Malik said simply. Reginald lifted his glass, sipped, set it down. Make certain this partnership does not become a liability. To you, to the company, to her. The way to do that, Malik said, is to stop treating her like one. They ate the rest of dinner in a truce built on knives facing the same direction. When Malik left, he texted Imani only, "Ate, no lies told, no promises made for you. We're good." She wrote back, "Good, paperwork tomorrow." It was their kind of affection, future-facing, unsentimental, true. Morning came with emails that felt like doors. Anna's subject line read Cardenas lease. Movement. Her body text sang, "Landlord concedes HVAC and ADA build-out at landlord expense, accepts 2 egress clause, caps rent increase at 3%, deletes demolition clause, agrees to white box delivery by Maywarn." AD Isaiah sent photos of a roof that looked like a lesson and a caption, "I'll bring a crew to test for lead mold." No surprises later. Miriam wrote, "Transit and time soft launch cleared. Matching up to $250K this quarter. Copy is dry and righteous. No photos required." By 9, Imani stood in the empty South Bronx space with a tape measure and the day's version of joy. Quiet, useful, already turning into lists. She and Anna walked the line-by-line red lines. Isaiah tapped pipes like a physician who'd decided to learn a second trade. Malik, on unofficial furniture duty, logged outlet counts and lumen levels and fetched a voltage tester without needing to be asked. When Inspector Bahar, Vanessa's soul with a clipboard, arrived, Anna slid him disclosures and conflict forms before she shook his hand. He smiled, signed where the lines told the truth, and made the kind of notes that fix problems before they become fines. "Front room can hold 50 safely," Bihar said, measuring with his body like a man whose eyes had done this math for 20 years. "Ramp here, 1/2 inch per foot rise, handrails both sides. Bathroom, grab bars, 34-inch door, no forgiveness. Egress, your alley gate is a rust opera. I'll need that replaced. If they balk, I balk harder." "Replace it," Cardenas said on speaker, Anna having engineered a call that offered him one option, the legal one. "I'll cover the gate. Send the estimate." "Thank you," Imani said. She didn't say good man. She'd learned to reserve praise for completed tasks, but she wrote gate. Owner on her pad and underlined twice. They measured window heights for a future mural that kids would design. They chose a front desk position that made welcome the first word. They marked a quiet room, reading and breathing in chalk because some days those were the same practice. They argued amiably about where the van should pull up. Isaiah traced cones of safety on the concrete with tape until everyone could see the choreography. By 11, they had a plan that looked like a floor they could stand on. At noon, they were back at Roots and Rise for the first of 3 standing meetings that made partnership an action, not a word. Meeting 1, Operations. Daryl ran it like a shift change. "Volunteer pipeline, church list, barbershop list, union hall referrals," he said, pointing to a whiteboard gridded like a quilt. "We assign every newbie a veteran. We do background checks, yes. We also do ground checks, who can be here at 7 p.m. without resentment. Snack captain rotates. Supply bins labeled. No mystery pencils." Malik raised a hand like a student. "I can underwrite the first quarter of bus passes through the fund. Public, boring, receipts for everything." "Good," Daryl said, giving him the exact amount of approval that keeps a man useful. "We'll need a card for refills, and a designated person to hold the card who is not impressed by the word urgent." "Keisha," half the room said, and Keisha did not smile, which counted as a yes. Meeting 2, Community. A parent advisory circle, folding chairs and a half moon, coffee in styrofoam cups, kids coloring at a side table. Imani opened with the question she always asked first. "What do our hours feel like at your house?" She heard the same truth she'd built the program on. Night shifts, early mornings, cousins watching cousins. The miracle a bus pass can be. A father asked for Saturday hours that didn't punish kids with weekend jobs. A grandmother asked if someone could call when homework hour ended. Not to check up, but to give her a clock to set her evening by. Imani wrote every request down like a bill she intended to pay in time. "When we move to the new space," she said, "we'll pilot an 8 to 9 p.m. quiet hour twice a week. We will only keep it if it works for you." Meeting 3, Communications. Not media, communications. Vanessa arrived with proofs from the print shop, bilingual flyers without logos, volunteer forms clean of grandeur, permission slips that fit whole lives into small boxes without erasing them. "Paper should make people's days easier," she said, Second Wednesday in flats, ponytail, no perfume cloud. If we need them larger print for abuelos, say the word. My shop can turn around in 24 hours. She handed Keisha a bundle. Keisha checked the Spanish translation with a church deacon, nodded once, and Vanessa let out a breath she hadn't known she'd been storing. By late afternoon, the transit and time match flipped from soft to live. The language was as unsexy as they'd promised. We fund miles and hours. We pay for keys, gas, schedules. We publish numbers you can yawn at and trust. Small dollars flooded like rain that understands gutters. $15, $20, $50. A teacher sent $10 with a note for whichever kid reminds you most of me in 10th grade. A city bus driver sent $30. I see those kids at my last stop. Get them home quicker. The page ticked past $17,000 before dinner. Each receipt a beat you could build a rhythm with. At 5, the space became the reason all this existed. Nyla read a page without stuttering on the commas that used to trip her. When she finished, the room clapped as if clapping were currency. Tariq brought a new word, steady, and used it in a sentence that made Keisha's eyes go slick and then dry again before anyone noticed. Vanessa knelt to retie a sneaker without turning it into a parable. Malik fixed a wobbly table by folding a flyer under one leg and didn't narrate his cleverness aloud. Imani walked through it all with a clipboard and a neck muscle that, for the first time in a week, had stopped bracing for impact. Around 6, Miriam texted Malik, board chatter. PR wants to piggyback our match with a gallery event. I told them the word gallery gives me hives. However, the Apollo has invited the foundation to a community night where organizations present their work. No red carpet, no step and repeat, no donation buckets on stage. Could be useful if we keep our mouth shut and our checkbook open. Malik forwarded it to Imani with a translation. Apollo. Community night, no circus. You speak if you want. Or I say no, your call. Imani thought for exactly 11 seconds. We accept if the rules travel. Neighborhood first seating, no filming kids' faces. We present with partners, not as saviors. And I get final cut on copy. Miriam replied bless in a way Imani hadn't realized the CFO had earned the right to say. That night, in the empty South Bronx space, they met the contractor's crew for a second walkthrough that felt like ceremony, only to people who worship at the altar of logistics. Isaiah chalked a ramp. Bihar signed off on egress. A painter named Lennox ran his palm over a wall and said, "We'll need primer that tells the past to hush." It sounded like poetry. It was just labor speaking fluently. Imani stayed behind with Malik after the crew left, the two of them in a room not yet theirs, standing where the reception desk would be. The street threw a wash of light across the floor that made the dust look like confetti. We don't do ribbon cuttings, she said. We do unlockings. We open a door at the same time every day until the city believes us. I'll be at the door with a screwdriver, he said, not a spotlight. The attraction between them had always shown up like this, inside work, not around it. He reached for her hand without urgency, a request more than a claim, and she let him take it because it felt like a tool that fit. We still do this on my schedule, she said softly. No proposals staged like philanthropy. If this becomes a life, it will be because it works in ordinary hours. I don't want extraordinary, he said. I want sustainable. She turned his palm over, traced the place a baton would have marked if track had become a career instead of a memory. There's a gala coming, she said. Every city has them. If we stand on that stage, we talk about van insurance and adult hours. We'll lose the room for a minute. We'll keep the ones worth keeping. I'll have our people lose the ones that aren't, he said, half smiling. Her phone buzzed. Anna again. Lease draft accepted with our changes. Signed Monday, contingent on inspections. Keys on delivery. Imani sent back a single word that had taken 1,000. Yes. They locked up and walked out into a night that had stopped threatening snow and settled for honesty. On the corner, a bodega owner tapped the open sign with a grin. You the lady with the kids? He asked. And when Imani said yes, he nodded like someone had told him the city would hold after all. We keep milk late for your people. And the good chips. Tell them ask for Luis. I will, she said, adding Chips Luis to a list that had started to look like a map. Back at the center, Vanessa handed her a stack of proofs for advisory flyers in Spanish that had been checked by a grandmother who used to teach in San Juan. Keisha handed her a sign-up sheet of mentors with boxes already scratched beside the unreliables. Daryl handed her a schedule that looked like a railway timetable because he took pride in making time behave. Malik handed her a receipt for outlet covers like it was a love letter. It was. Knight pressed its forehead to the windows and listened. The small donor match clicked past $38,000. A bus driver forwarded the fund link to a WhatsApp group of night shift nurses. Money followed like a kind of applause. A journalist emailed to ask for a quote and received a politely formatted, "Our work happens on Wednesdays 4 to 7. You're welcome to volunteer." The Apollo confirmed a community night slot and asked for a sentence that sums you up. Imani sent back, "We fund miles and hours and we keep promises with keys." In a different part of town, Reginald read the transit and time page in his office and, without quite realizing it, relaxed at the sight of numbers no intern had sugared. Miriam forwarded him an internal chart. Small donation sources by neighborhood, match balance, vendor invoices for Metro cards and van insurance. It looked like something a company could be proud of without staging pride. He closed his eyes and saw a bench in Morningside, a woman with a spine like a law, his son speaking without looking for permission. He did not call anyone. He did not send instructions. He let the mechanism hum. At home, Imani wrote 3 headings in her notebook. Lease Apollo Wednesday. Under lease, sign Monday, inspect Thursday, paint Saturday, open by June. Under Apollo, no red carpet Q&A, partners on stage, numbers not nouns. Under Wednesday, Daryl, schedule. Vanessa, print. Keisha, prune. Malik, cables. Me, names. She added a 4th heading without thinking. Vows, then crossed it out because she didn't like foreshadowing her own life, and wrote instead, standards. Before sleep, her phone pinged one more time. Vanessa, flyers at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Also, I have 3 nurses and a teacher for mentoring, references attached. No perfume. Flats forever. Malik, texting first. I can get a second-hand van inspected by Isaiah's cousin. No branding, just brakes that work, yes? Imani, yes, receipts, seatbelts, keys by June. Keisha, important, who ate my labeled yogurt? Daryl, Tariq taught me resilient on a beat. Man's a poet. Anna, lease PDF in your inbox. Sign Monday. Bring your pen with bite marks. Lawyers love honesty. She set the phone face down and let the day turn to tomorrow. The city kept moving, impatient and generous as it always does. The work kept its shape because they kept their rules. The love kept its pace because they refused to feed it theatrics. And somewhere, a kid fell asleep knowing the door would open at the same time next week. Because it always did. Because someone had decided the most radical thing they could do was show up on schedule and fund the miles between a life and a future. The Apollo marquee didn't bother with names. It lit the block with a simple promise. Community night. No red carpet, no step and repeat, no velvet ropes that teach people to rank themselves. Inside, ushers in black t-shirts held clipboards that read Neighborhood First. The first 3 rows carried handwritten placards with church names, a barbershop, a tenants association, a soccer league, a PTA. The balcony filled with the usual constellation. Donors with good posture, board members who'd learned to lower their voices, a handful of reporters who looked almost disappointed by the absence of spectacle. Backstage, Imani stood in the half-light with her notes tucked into a folder marked receipts and her breath steady, the way practice makes possible. Malik checked cable runs at the podium, coiled slack like a man who knows the cost of a trip. Miriam checked the dull beauty of a slide that showed nothing but numbers and labels. Anna compared a printed run of show with the legal language on the program, to make sure no one had slipped in a promise the foundation didn't intend to keep. Keisha frowned at a volunteer whose lanyard hung crooked, until the lanyard repented and corrected itself. Vanessa, hair pulled back, flat scuffed by choice, handed out bilingual programs and showed ushers how to keep reporters from filming kids' faces without making it a fight. Daryl moved in a small orbit around Imani, clearing her lane like a point guard who loved the game more than the applause. House to half, a stage manager called, and the lights answered. From the wings, Nana Ruth and Grandad Earl took 2 seats offered like an altar. They sat with the neighborhood, not the balcony, because they had always sat with the neighborhood. Imani ran her hands down the seams of her jacket. Malik stood shoulder to shoulder with her, not touching, near enough to count. "You good?" he asked. "I am exactly what tonight needs," she said, and believed herself. He smiled a small private smile. The kind that says it's a privilege to witness someone convincing their own lungs how to behave. The curtain didn't so much rise as exhale. A local youth choir opened with an old song about getting over. They'd rehearsed without cameras and would leave the stage the same way. When the last note landed, a gentle cheer rolled forward from the front rows and up from the balcony like the city agreeing for a minute. The MC, no slickness, just a voice that sounded like stoops and park benches, gave the rules. No filming kids' faces. Questions after. In the lobby with sign-up sheets. Tonight is for work and what it costs. First up, he said, transit and time. Imani walked to the podium with a gait that didn't wait for permission. She didn't carry charisma like a flame. She carried it like a tool. Good evening, she said, and the house leaned in. My name is Imani Carter. I run Roots and Rise, and I'm here with the foundation that finally learned to do something brave. Fund what isn't photogenic. On the screen behind her, a slide appeared, 3 lines, miles, hours, keys. Transit and time does 3 things, she said. Buys miles, metro cards, van insurance, inspections, gas. Buys hours. Consistent adults at the exact times our kids need them. Funds keys. The boring, beautiful act of opening a door at the same time every day. We publish numbers you can trust and yawn at. We don't rename programs. We don't take pictures of children to prove we cared. The choir kids, now in the front row out of their robes, nodded like they recognized themselves in the policy. Numbers came next, and they were deliberately plain. $41,380 in small dollar donations in a week. The match climbing toward $250,000. Pre-940 MetroCard swipes. 312 mentor hours delivered on schedule. 3 vans inspected. 1 lease in the South Bronx with ADA and egress clauses that would make an inspector's grandmother proud. Boring on purpose, Miriam had written in the corner of the slide. A laugh moved through the balcony like relief. Imani told a short story made of names and verbs, not violins. Nyla read an entire page last night without tripping on the commas that used to act like potholes. Tariq said resilient like it belonged to him, then taught Daryl how to say it on a beat. None of that required a gala. It required a key, a bus pass, and an adult at 7 p.m. with a clipboard and a memory. The MC cued her next bit, an invitation disguised as logistics. If you want to help, Imani said, we have a table in the lobby. You can sign up to mentor on Wednesdays 4/7, under Keisha's supervision. You can fund van insurance. You can print flyers that don't put your name on the bottom. If you're a business, you can hire teenagers for summer jobs and pay them wages they don't have to be ashamed of. If you're media, you can volunteer first. If you're here to be seen, this is the wrong night. If you're here to serve, we have a schedule for you. Applause, not polite, not explosive. Something steadier, like work boots on a floor. In the balcony, Reginald Sinclair sat in a dark jacket he wore like a pause. He had told himself he was there to measure risk. He found himself counting on his fingers, an old habit he thought he'd killed in law school. He felt against habit the cool weight of a standard he hadn't set. The next segment brought partners to the stage. A bus driver from the Bronx who explained routes like arteries. A church deacon who talked about volunteers as pews that refused to be empty. A barber who said his shop ran on algebra and dignity, and could supply both on Wednesdays. Vanessa didn't take the mic. She held up the new bilingual flyer and said into a stagehand's ear, Spanish font size is good? Abuela checked. The stagehand nodded. A reporter in the 10th row tried to film a teenager's face. An usher stepped in with grace that tasted like Keisha and said, Hands off the minors. Brother. And the camera blinked away. When Malik finally took 5 seconds at the podium, it was to say a sentence that had cost him meetings. There are no naming rights here. He said it like a vow, stepped back like a man who meant to keep it, and returned to his cables as if his job were gravity. The Q&A was tight and kind. A woman asked how to keep her grandson involved when the bus ran late. Answer, we will call you at 7:05 when quiet hour starts so you know he's safe and studying. A man asked if the fund would go beyond the boroughs. Answer from Miriam, only once we can prove the miles and hours here. We don't franchise. We iterate. A reporter asked Imani if she worried about being a figurehead. I worry about being useful, she said. Tonight is useful. Tomorrow is Wednesday. That's where we live. When it ended, the house lights came up slow and gentle. The way you wake someone you love. The lobby swelled without tipping. At the sign-up tables, scissors snipped wristbands into mentor badges. A city bus driver explained shift realities to a hedge fund analyst who had the decency to take notes. A PTA president traded babysitting for Wednesday shifts with a nurse. Vanessa triaged forms into piles that made Daryl's future easier. Keisha ran background check instructions like a drill sergeant with mercy. Anna explained to a couple of cautious small business owners how to offer paid internships without inviting nightmares. She slid templates across the table like lifelines. A barber named Jean promised 15 free first-day haircuts. A principal crossed her arms, said, "Don't offer what you can't sustain," and Jean said, "I sustain by principle," and the small crowd hummed in approval. In a quiet corner of the lobby, Nana Ruth shook Reginald's hand without fanfare. He had come down the stairs last, staying out of the line of sight, a man learning humility by proximity. "You're the father," she said, and it wasn't a question. "You got a good boy there. Took you long enough to see him." "Perhaps it did," he said, the words tasting like admission in an unfamiliar tongue. "Your granddaughter is formidable." "She's useful," Nana said. "Formidable is what people call you when they don't know how to say you're right. You look like a man who likes rules." "Learn ours," he almost smiled. "I have been studying." "Study faster," she said, then patted his sleeve like a benediction and turned to scold Granddad Earl for trying to lift a box he had no business lifting. Reginald stepped back with the expression of a man unaccustomed to being put in his place, but not hating where he'd been put. By 9, the lobby had thinned to the kind of hum that means the room has done its job. Reporters filed copy that, astonishingly, kept Imani's words whole. A columnist wrote about the audacity of boring and meant it as praise. A station ran a clip of the slide that said, "Miles, hours, keys, and let the graphics sit," instead of cutting to B-roll of children who hadn't consented to be content. Imani stood in a side hall where the velvet looked tired and good, reading text she didn't have time to answer. Mentors confirming. A landlord confirming gate replacement. Miriam sending the match counter like a heartbeat. Anna making a joke about Ada compliance being more romantic than roses. Malik came up beside her with 2 paper cups of water, and the face he wore when something had landed where it should. "You turned a theater into a schedule," he said. "We turned a room into a standard," she corrected. "And we did it without a single slow-motion montage." "Your line about nameplates and schedules had a CFO tearing up," he said. Miriam hid behind a spreadsheet. "She's allowed," Imani said. She earned a cry. They walked back on stage with the stagehands helping coil the last chords because leaving a place better than you found it started with literal floors. The choir kids waved goodnight like kids do when they think grown-ups might notice their existence and applaud it later. Keisha stacked programs into a bag with the efficiency of a quartermaster who knows wars are won by lists. On the sidewalk under the marquee, winter was less cruel, or maybe the light made it look that way. A man asked if there would be more nights like this. "There will be Wednesdays," Imani said. "Wednesdays are how nights like this become normal." She and Malik walked toward Lennox without hurrying. The attraction between them met the streetlight like it had agreed to be seen only when it could be useful. He reached for her hand where cameras weren't, and she let him have it because the day had made its case and she was allowed to be a person in it. "Proud of you," he said. And the words weren't about the stage. They were about the way she set rules and kept them. The way the city had learned to behave for a whole hour because she'd asked it to. "Proud of us," she said. "We didn't flinch." Her phone buzzed, the kind of buzz that means not trouble but movement. Miriam. "Match at 102,180. Small donors outpacing our forecast." Board silent. "A miracle." Anna. "Lease signing Monday confirmed. Keys on delivery. Inspector Bihar requests empanadas as retainer." Isaiah. "Roof holds. Ramp chalked. Primer ordered." Vanessa. 36 mentor apps tonight. 19 look solid, 8 may be performative, 9 need Keisha's stare. Keisha. "My stare is booked." They reached a corner where a deli had forgotten to close and thanked the oversight with 2 sandwiches and a bag of chips with Luis's name on the receipt. On a whim that wasn't a whim, Imani sent a photo of the marquee to Nana Ruth with the words, "We behaved." Nana replied, "I saw. Heaven did too. Bring back programs. I'll press one into the Bible to shame future generations." Imani laughed into her scarf and tucked the program into her bag like a psalm. Across town, Reginald sat at his desk and wrote an email he'd never written before. "To, board, Community night. The Foundation's focus on operational funding is correct. We will not seek visibility at the expense of outcomes. If comms request press, they route to my office. Consider the match extended next quarter if metrics hold. He hovered over send a second longer than habit, then clicked. He looked out over a city he'd spent a life trying to hold in his palm and wondered, quietly, without urgency, what it would feel like to be held by it instead. Near midnight, the transit and time page ticked past $120,000. Someone from a dispatcher's union dropped $5,000 with a note that read, "Breaks before banners." A columnist's piece about boring became the rare thing, a link people shared without arguing in the comments. A donor asked how to give without a dinner. Miriam sent a URL in blessed silence. The Apollo cleared its stage and left only dust. Tomorrow a different show would make a different case. Tonight the case had been made in lowercase letters and schedules and the refusal to flatter power. In her apartment, Imani slid the program under a stack of lease drafts and bus pass invoices and wrote 3 lines before bed. Teach rooms how to listen. Make outcomes public. Keep Wednesdays holy. She added a 4th without meaning to. Don't let love outrun the work. Then she crossed out don't and wrote let neither outrun the other, because she believed in balance the way some people believe in luck. Malik texted last. Texting first. Proud of us. Also, I found a van. 2017, low miles, no logos. Isaiah's cousin can inspect Saturday. Keys by June still holds. She replied breaks before banners. Keys then doors, sleep, the city obliged. It held them in the soft machinery of buses running late but running. Radiators hissing. Someone practicing a trumpet 3 floors down. Streetlights doing math on empty avenues. In that hum, the narrative turned a click you could almost hear from curiosity to respect. It wouldn't stay unless they kept earning it. They would. Tomorrow was Wednesday. The lease ink dried on a Monday that smelled like primer and resolve. By Thursday, the alley gate had been replaced. The ramp chalk turned to lumber, and Isaiah stood on the front step rubbing primer between forefinger and thumb like a man checking a pulse. Imani held keys that had weight and purpose. Malik held a box of outlet covers and a look that said he understood the holiness of small parts. Anna read one last clause out loud for the pleasure of hearing a contract behave. Keisha walked the perimeter with a clipboard as if measuring respect. Daryl plotted volunteer shifts in squares. Vanessa stacked bilingual flyers against a wall that would soon hold names. They didn't cut a ribbon. They unlocked a door. Kids walked in like the city had finally kept a promise. The van, 2017, inspected, no logos, the brakes worth more than the paint, pulled to the curb with Luis from the bodega, waving like he was part of the fleet. Nyla touched the front desk and blinked quickly once. Tariq whispered a word to the room, steady, and the room accepted it. That night, after the last chair was stacked and the last pencil found a bin with its name on it, Malik stood by the new ramp with his hands in his pockets, trying to find a sentence that didn't pretend to be a flourish. He had a ring, simple, unremarkable to anyone who thought rings needed to be seen, thumbed smooth from weeks of pocket carry. He had a plan that wasn't one. Ask a question in the only place that made sense on a floor they'd earned, in a light that didn't flatter anyone. Walk with me, he said, and Imani did, the two of them tracing the loop of the room like a prayer they'd memorized. He stopped at the front desk because beginnings live at thresholds. I don't have speeches, he said. I have schedules. I don't have a symbol, he added, holding out the ring that looked like an O someone had drawn on a day they needed one good circle. I have a tool. I want to build a life that keeps this room open and keeps us honest. I want Wednesdays and contracts and keys and laughter in your rules when mine get lazy. I want a family that thinks van insurance is romance. I want to be your partner. Legally, loudly, quietly, always. Marry me? The yes arrived without drama. Not because there wasn't feeling, but because feeling here didn't need to raise its voice. Yes, Imani said, and reached for him the way one reaches for light switches in known rooms. He slid the ring on. She slid a thinner band on his finger that looked like a promise a track coach would respect, and they stood with foreheads touching. Nothing cinematic about it except the sensation of a life clicking into alignment with its values. They told Nana Ruth first because protocol and love agreed for once. Praise the Lord in the calendar, Nana said, and then, practical as ever, we will not spend foolish. We will not dress like debt. And we will eat. They did not plan a ballroom. They planned a gathering that would look like a Wednesday made festive, a South Bronx blessing where a ramp doubled as an aisle and a corkboard turned witness. The choir promised 2 songs. The bus driver volunteered to shuttle elders. The deacon promised chairs. The barber promised edges for every kid in the front row. Luis promised the good chips and ginger ale. Isaiah promised the lights wouldn't hum like a mosquito. Anna promised the paperwork. License, permit. Insurance rider would be invisible and perfect. Miriam promised to pay the sanitation fee without a word. Vanessa promised childcare in a side room and turned out to be a genius with toddlers and crayons. Keisha promised to keep speeches under 3 minutes and meant it. Daryl promised to run the day like a train schedule and smiled for the first time in public while saying so. On the morning the city would see them, the center smelled like lemon oil and starch. Folding chairs drew straight lines down the room, pews made of metal and intention. The aisle was a strip of floor waxed to a shine you could fall into if you weren't careful. The choir tuned on save your voice style. A sign at the door read, no photos of minors, and nobody argued. A smaller sign below it read, Keys Banners because jokes help people follow rules. Imani wore a dress without a train because trains need crews, and crew time belonged to kids. The dress had pockets because the world is easier when women have places to put their hands. In one pocket, a program. In the other, a Metro card because why not? Nana fastened a small piece of lace at her wrist and told her she looked like a woman who knew where she was going. Granddad Earl's tie was crooked on purpose because he liked to look like himself in pictures. He had not cried yet and did not plan to. Keisha pinned a sprig of green on Daryl because the man ran the world and deserved foliage. Vanessa wore flats without shame and a smile that looked like it had learned to trust goodness when it arrived quietly. Anna checked and then rechecked, and then put her folder down because the law had for once nothing left to add. Miriam sat 2 rows back, a hand on an envelope nobody needed to see. Isaiah wiped a non-existent speck off a light fixture and stood in the back like he was responsible for gravity. Malik stood at the front with a suit that fit like respect. No tie because he wanted to breathe. Reginald took a seat 3 rows from the back, beside a woman whose shoes had seen a lot of church floors and a man who had opinions about the Knicks. No one fussed over him because no one needed to. He had come without entourage, without the urge to be accommodated, with a suspicion that humility might be good for his back. If he was uneasy, he wore it like a bow tie the wrong color, visible only to him. The music began without overpromising itself. The choir sang an old song about crossing a river, not because anyone needed metaphor, but because the tune makes spines sit straighter. Nyla read a short passage about beginnings, not from a book that would put anyone to sleep, but from a notebook where she'd copied a sentence she loved. A name is a beginning, not a boundary. Tariq recited 3 lines of his own. The syllables matched to breath he now owned. When he stumbled on resilience, the room exhaled with him and the words stood anyway. Imani walked down the aisle on Nana's arm because arms are not about patriarchy when they're about being held up by the person who taught you to breathe. Malik met her halfway because meeting people where they are is a value, not a trope. They stepped onto a small piece of rug borrowed from the side room, because somebody said you shouldn't stand on bare floor when you make forever. They shrugged and trusted a rug Nana had prayed over. The officiant was a woman who had pastored more funerals than weddings and liked the ratio changing. She spoke briefly because Keisha had glared at her during rehearsal, and also because brevity is kindness. We are here because these 2 have decided to schedule their love, she said, and laughter warmed the aisle. We bless what blesses the block. Vows came without lace. Malik went first. I promise to be boring where it matters. Paperwork, groceries, maintenance, showing up with cables, fixing the thing that hums. I promise to be loud where it's required. Rooms that try to eat people, board tables that mistake PR for conscience. I promise to text first. I promise to choose budgets over banquets, keys over banners, Wednesdays over cleverness. I promise not to make our life a performance. I promise to love you in ordinary hours. Imani didn't blink away anything. I promise to keep the mission bigger than my pride, our love bigger than anyone's expectations, and our home open enough to feed whoever needs a chair and a story. I promise to name what's wrong without making you fix what I didn't ask you to fix. I promise to listen like outcomes depend on it. I promise to eat before I faint. I promise to build with you a life where van insurance feels holy and schedules feel like love. The rings were simple and cool and right. The officiant declared with no nonsense what everyone already knew. Nana shouted amen like a woman tipping a scale. The choir sang a song that dared anyone not to believe in mornings. They kissed like agreements getting notarized. There was no receiving line. There was a buffet along the side wall and folding tables blooming with aluminum pans and foil miracles. Mac and cheese that made atheists hedge. Collards that tasted like somebody had argued with them into glory. Fried chicken that accepted applause. Cupcakes that committed to frosting. Luis brought out the good chips and people got territorial in ways that did not disrupt the peace. The barber set up a chair in a corner and gave shape-ups to any kid who wanted a picture afterward. Someone taped butcher paper to a wall and wrote blessings at the top. By dusk, the paper was full of first names and verbs. Stay, show up, keep going, read, laugh, rest, vote, walk, listen. Reginald stood at the edge of the room like a man deciphering a new dialect. He did not make a toast. He did hand Miriam a handwritten note that said, "Extend match next quarter. No events, more vans." He did shake Daryl's hand for longer than politeness demanded and say, "Your schedule frightened a private equity partner," to which Daryl replied, "Good," and walked away to refill a pan. He did tap Vanessa's shoulder and say, "Thank you," and Vanessa, who had spent the morning with a 4-year-old on her hip and a newborn schedule in her head, said, "You're welcome," like a person who now understood her power when it was pointed in the right direction. He did squeeze Nana's hand and say, "I learned some rules," and Nana said, "Keep your homework up." Sometime between the second choir song and the cupcakes, the Apollo called to confirm a fall showcase where kids would read what they'd written under a banner that didn't need the foundation's name. Anna intercepted the call and said yes to logistics and no to anything that smelled like a red carpet. Isaiah fixed a hinge that squeaked on the bathroom door without stopping his plate. Keisha sent 2 teenagers to deliver leftovers to the building next door, where an elder had missed the service because her knees had thoughts. Vanessa added 3 more nurses to the mentor list. Miriam handed Imani a spreadsheet printed on paper, because gifts can be in your hand too. Louise replenished chips like the sea. Tariq floated around the room saying resilient to people until they said it back. And if that's not liturgy, nobody tell him. The photographer in the corner took pictures of hands and feet and plates and never once of a child's face without permission. As afternoon leaned toward evening, the chairs spread apart into circles. Malik danced badly in a way that made Imani feel safe. Imani danced well in a way that made Malik feel lucky. Keisha danced like she'd been planning it while writing rules. Nana clapped on 2 and 4. Reginald did not dance, but he smiled without checking himself first. When it was time to go outside for the block blessing, the neighborhood stepped into the street like a congregation. A bus driver idled and honked twice like a benediction. Someone from a 3rd-floor window tossed confetti made from hole-punched programs. A cop car rolled by slow and decided to keep rolling because peace was already handling it. On the steps, Imani and Malik stood with their foreheads together again, this time with a ring of people around them that looked more like infrastructure than audience. The officiant lifted a hand and named what they all knew, that a marriage like this is a civic project too, that love is public when it serves, that vows are only as good as the Tuesdays they survive. "Keys," she said, and the room, now a block, held up keys on lanyards and rings and strings, to doors, to vans, to apartments, to offices, to drawers where people keep receipts and prayers together. The sound of them was not pretty. It was better. It was true. Night came patient and loud the way New York does it, everybody talking at once and somehow hearing each other anyway. The last pans were covered, the last chairs folded, the last bins labeled, the last kid hugged and shooed home. Malik took out trash because that's romance too. Imani signed one last thank you note because gratitude is administration. They stood in the doorway with the lights off behind them and the city facing forward. "We did it," Malik said, and meant the day. "We're doing it," Imani corrected, and meant the life. He kissed her in the doorway, a small, right kiss where no camera had the angle and every neighbor had the context. She slipped the Metro card from her pocket into his coat and said, smiling, "You're on snack duty Wednesday." He saluted with 2 fingers and a grin that had learned to live under rules, and like it. "Text first?" he asked out of habit more than need. "Text first," she said, "because promises taste better when you keep repeating them." They locked the door together with a click that sounded like a chapter ending and a routine beginning. The van sat quiet ready. The schedule for the week hung on the corkboard, holy. The city hummed, imperfect and generous as it always would. And somewhere inside the paperwork and the pencils and the vows, a truth sat with its feet on the floor. Love had not outrun the work, and the work had not outrun the love. They were keeping pace mile by mile, hour by hour, key by key.